This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mathieu on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Mr. Barr back in the saddle. Thank you, Michael Barr, for coming back and giving us some important news, political news here to the debate tomorrow. Lisa Mathieu with us as well. And as just met and Nathan Hager and Kara Moscow just said, there's the headline.
Yeah.
1986 on Japanese yen.
That was a good year for me, 1986. But the yen here at 160. I mean, again, when we saw that about a month or so ago, Tom, we saw the Bank of Japan come in there and look to intervene into this market. Will they do that again here?
Coming from our world headquarters today, and it's important you understand we've got all sorts of elevators and security, as you can imagine here. Right now, security is holding elevators for Damian Sassower. He's scheduled to be with us here in a moment. Mr. Sassower coming to our studios, the interactive broker studios, to brief us on Japanese yen. That's the surveillance advantage we try to give you. Big day into tomorrow's day. Joe Mathieu will be joining us later. He and Kaylee Lyons leading our coverage, and it's just the story.
We're going to have David Gura in Atlanta, is that right?
Today I did not know.
No,
that.
I mean just for the
Gura will be there.
He will be there for the.
He's going to be holding court at Bar Margaux at the Four Seasons Hotel. We look forward.
I like the Ritz at Buckhead. That's kind of my Atlanta go-to.
Yeah, that's another good one. Red and green on the screen. Currency markets on the move. The 10-year real yield not giving me much. 2.05. Lots of economic data here on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa Mathieu.
You got it. And right now we have stock futures. We're a bit mixed. We have NASDAQ futures, though, leading the gains this morning, suggesting Wall Street's tech-driven rally, well, that may still have some momentum. NVIDIA, big part of that. Their shares up another 1% before the bell. And that's extending that rebound from Monday's $430 billion rout. So we have NASDAQ futures up about 0.1%, 28 points. Dow futures, they're down about 0.1%, down 59 points. S&P futures are little changed. Over to the bond market, we have the 2-year yield, 4.73%. That's down about 1 basis point. The 10-year yield, 4.28%, and up 2 basis points. Have to talk currencies because you just mentioned it. The Japanese yen, 160.37 against the dollar. Moving the markets this morning, EV maker Rivian shares up 35%. It's getting financial lifeline thanks to a new partnership with Volkswagen, which will invest $5 billion in the company. Shares of FedEx, they're up too. They're up nearly 14%. Profits beat estimates. The firm hinted at that divestiture of its freight business on top of it. And we're expecting more results later today. We have General Mills, after the bell, Levi Strauss, Paychex, and also NVIDIA rival Micron Technology.
I'm a Levi's guy.
You're a Levi's guy.
Not Lee or Matt Miller does the fashion stuff. Like he does like the designer stuff. No, Levi's.
You can't do that.
No.
You're a Lee guy. All right, that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mathieu, thanks so much. We're going to go right now to Amanda Agati of PNC Bank Pittsburgh here on these equity markets. I was really taken aback yesterday by the tech recovery, Amanda, that we saw. Not to speak of individual names, but what does it mean that we saw the tech lift yesterday?
Well, it's great to be with you guys. Thanks for having me. It's the same story. It feels like a deja vu all over again moment. That tech story just continues to be so strong and really a market leader because they have the underlying fundamental chops to back it up. That's really where the strength of the earnings growth and the profitability for the broader market is concentrated. And so we continue to see that really be the market moving leader here. No change in that perspective at all.
What are you doing with cash right now?
Well, we're certainly putting cash to work. I think it depends on what a client is trying to achieve. So it's hard to make some wild sort of generalizations about putting cash to work. But on the fixed income side of the equation, we think there's a little bit more opportunity here in the short run than what we're seeing on the equity side. You know, equities are effectively priced to perfection at these levels. So I'd love to get another bite at it here with a little bit more volatility over the course of the summer. But in fixed income markets, we think investment grade is really still very much the place to be. A lot of opportunities there, being very mindful of duration positioning, not going too far out. But you got to put some of that cash to work because we're still very much on the eve of Fed rate cuts coming.
Amanda, we saw NVIDIA, which really, a lot of folks believed was kind of a bellwether for this marketplace, declined 13% over, just a 3-day period. Yet the market kind of hung in there. Did that surprise you that the market had so much resilience?
It did surprise me, and actually I'm thrilled with that kind of a surprise, because I think it was a very good test of market fragility. We've been talking all year about the Fab Five or the Magnificent Seven, really being the very focused and concentrated leaders of the market. What happens when there's a misstep or even they take a breath? Does that mean the bottom 493 can't support the rest of the market? We were proven wrong on that. So we'll take it. From a fragility perspective, maybe not so fragile here as the summer months get going.
With breaking news, Amanda, we got to go to one more question, and we'll have you back soon, I promise, with PNC Financial. Amanda, Paul, does the earnings season beckon? It's like we're here. It's like June 26th.
We're going to get,
FedEx
exactly.
sort of starts it.
But we'll start a new cycle in the third week of June.
You've got a unique vision in Pittsburgh. It's a different view than New York City. Amanda Agati, what does earnings season look like? What does it portend?
So I actually think Q2 earnings season is very pivotal for this environment, because in Amanda math, that's a technical term for you, we actually think that we will see positive earnings growth for the S&P 500, whether you include or exclude the Fab Five or the Magnificent Seven. So I've been saying we've still been in this earnings recession because it's really been masked by the top 5 or top 7 names. And so we think we're going to hit an inflection point with Q2 earnings season. That's really important catalyst for the market in the back half of the year.
Amanda, thank you so much. Amanda Gotti, PNC Bank. On this Wednesday morning, thoughts of intervention by Japan, by their Ministry of Finance, by the Bank of Japan. We have the expertise of Damien Sassower, who joins us in studio. Damien, I want to focus on Japan right now.
Yeah.
There was a paper over 30 years ago, Dominguez and Frankel, Jeff Frankel of Harvard, which said, you know what, when we study it, intervention actually can affect markets and affect dollar. This will be the third time around for Japan if they choose to intervene. Do you see any efficacy for the people of Japan?
Well, here, you make a very good point. I mean, look, Asia is noted by central bank intervention. It's not just Japan, it's China as well, it's others. And so, look, trend followers, momentum-based strategies, a momentum-based approach to trading Asian FX has worked and will continue to work until we are disproven otherwise. And so, look, if you look at dollar yen, yes, we're hitting some, pretty extreme levels, but if you look at risk reversals, if you look at vols, one month vols are at 9%. They really haven't budged.
What does that mean for amateurs? What does that mean?
It just means that the currency appears relatively well behaved, despite the fact that we're at levels that are pushing into 1986.
So we're in trend to yen depreciation. We've seen Chinese managed depreciation with the Chinese 10-year today going down to new yields. I would suggest, and I sent you a message here, he wasn't awake.
Oh, I know.
I sent him a message, and I said, I'm sorry, idiosyncratic is over. Damien Sassower, in the heat of the summer.
It's not over.
What's going on?
Investors are looking for uncorrelated streams of fixed income. That's just a fact. And they're looking for it in places like emerging markets. Now, I'm not calling Japan an emerging market, even though it's kind of behaving that way of late. But look, I think, you have to understand that the Japanese yen is a funding currency. It allows investors to take leverage in other areas of the world. And so, until, again, proven otherwise, the yen's going to be a funding currency alongside the China yuan, the Taiwan dollar, and the other Asian low yielders.
To call somebody a funding currency is not a compliment, right?
Well, it depends, right? I mean, if you have supports in other area, and look, we have some data coming out of Japan on Friday. We have industrial production. We have Tokyo CPI, which is their preferred inflation gauge. And look, we probably are going to see prices accelerating. I mean, if you just look at what they're paying people at Nomura, I don't know if you saw that headline on the terminal, but people are getting paid quite a lot to work in Japan. And so, look, I think despite the fact that this is poor forced sentiment, Tom, it's steady as she goes. This is a way to invest.
Completely unfair question.
Okay.
Like, are you sitting with all your team at Bloomberg Intelligence, waiting by the Bloomberg screen to see if MOF or BOJ do something? How does this work?
No, I mean, I think it's implied that, look, I mean, the market's going to pull on this thread. I've been saying it, Tom, for some time. I don't expect, us to end here at 160, 161. We probably will push up to 165. But it's all about duration. It's all about the time to get there. You don't want to just jump to 165 overnight. Okay. They want to manage that move, and I think investors and markets are prepared for it.
Are you playing golf in 90-degree weather?
I can't. It's really hot out there.
Hot.
It's really hot out there. My neck, I twinged something in my neck, too, so I'm really a little bit injured here.
Lisa, could you give David
I can't.
I'm getting old. My arthritic condition, my right hand.
My
my chipping's not there.
Michael Barr's going to throw a brick at you. David Cesar, thank you so much. With our news in New York City, healthy Michael Barr.
Oh, my. Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and Lisa. A New York Democratic congressman lost his primary. Incumbent Jamal Bowman has lost his contentious primary in New York's 16th congressional district. Bowman was defeated by Westchester County Executive George Latimer, 58 to 42%, with 88% in. The Israel-Hamas war catapulted this race into national attention. Latimer at his election night victory party in White Plains.
We have to look at the arguments of the far right and the far left and say, you cannot destroy this country with your rhetoric and your arguments.
Bowman, speaking to his supporters last night, has accused Israel of committing genocide in Gaza.
We will never stand for the bombing and killing of babies in Gaza.
Bowman's stance led to outside organizations pouring in tons of money, with a total spending more than $20 million, making this New York primary one of the most expensive on record. Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert is projected to win the primary for the Colorado House race. She spoke to her supporters last night.
I want to thank each and every one of you and your neighbors and your friends, your family members. Thank you for those tough conversations that you have had with people. Thank you for educating yourself on this race.
Boebert switched her bid to Ken Buck's jurisdiction, which is far more Republican-friendly. Buck said that he would not seek re-election. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is back in Australia following a guilty plea in a U.S. court that allowed him to return to his home country, a free man, after serving time in a U.K. prison and holding up in an Ecuadorian embassy. Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, arrested in Russia on espionage charges, appeared in a court for the start of his trial. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And Michael Barr, thanks so much. It's a general rule that I never go below 57th Street. I mean, I'll go half a block Tiffany's, maybe Gucci. That's it.
Yep.
Sweeney last night making the trek downtown. Bloomberg Invest with the quality that was shocking. Shonali Basak has just killed it on her project.
She really did. Bloomberg Live, Shonali Basak put on this in second day is today. Bloomberg Invest. A lot of the leading financial players in the business, Tom, on stage talking about the markets, talking about kind of what they see in terms of global Wall Street and economics going forward, and some great segments, some great speakers. And I'll be down there again later today with Alex Steele.
And I'm sorry. Ethereum, which I don't understand. No. I mean, I lost money. Lisa, I lost money on the Doge.
Yes.
That bill went in, so I had to buy the Doge. But Gensler to Anne-Marie Horton on Ethereum moved the market.
Yeah, he's saying we're on top of it here. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are concerned that the SEC has not taken just a more, I don't know, just more active role in here in terms of crypto. But from Mr. Gensler's perspective, they're on it.
And is Belchunas there? I mean, he's everywhere.
He's everywhere. So I don't know. He's either there or South Beach. I can't
Bloomberg
keep track.
Invest, Shonali Basak with Paul Sweeney and Alex Steele. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mathieu. We've got little movement in futures. NASDAQ futures seeing a slight lift up about 0.1% or 36 points. Dow futures down 0.1%, 70 points. We have S&P futures, little changed, down up a fraction as well. To the bond market, we'll take you to the 2-year yield at 4.73%, down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.28%, and that's up 3 basis points. To currencies, yes, the Japanese yen breached the 160 per dollar mark right now. Japanese yen 160.28 against the dollar. More economic data out today, starting with new home sales for May. That comes out at 10 a.m. Wall Street time. Meanwhile, the MBA says mortgage applications rose for a third week in a row last week. Tomorrow, we move on to durable goods, initial jobless claims, GDP, but all attention focused on Friday. We have PC inflation, spending, income. Some legal troubles for Disney. Shares are a little changed, but the company could face a class action lawsuit. It alleges its agreements with YouTube and DirecTV has led to price increases for consumers. And then Paramount Global, the company says it's talking with potential international streaming partners. Those shares down about 0.5%. And finally, British food delivery company Deliveroo. Those shares are higher after Jeffrey said a Reuters report of DoorDash's interest in a takeover, quote, may only be the start. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Is that possibly because every child I know is glued to all this stuff?
Oh, we have
Deliveroo,
a strict zero tolerance
seamlesses.
policy in my household for
Have
delivery
you?
stuff. Oh,
I just went nuts. I said, for one day, you're not doing this.
yep.
The delivery fees are crazy.
Can't do it.
It
Shut off the credit card.
In their defense,
You cut
It's
them
for
off.
3
yes,
days. I shut them off.
it's our fault. It's my fault.
It's
These
my
kids
fault.
are addicted to these breakfasts. I'm like, are you kidding me? Get a skillet, 2 eggs, some butter. Let's go.
I get the McDonald's DoorDash
Okay,
thing
well,
pops up on my. Oh,
You know, it's a chaotic day, and the news flow on economics, finance, and investment is too much. Right now, we're going to go to Leslie Falconio with UBS, and then we're going to have a special guest coming in. He was
Wow.
at a charging station.
Yeah.
Charging up his EV. We weren't sure he'd
I know,
get here
I know.
because it takes 4 hours to charge up the thing. We'll get to our special mystery guest here in a moment. Leslie, good morning. In a chaotic market, are you clipping a coupon in fixed income, or can you say total return for the rest of 2024?
Well, look, I think it's a combination of both. And I think that what we have and what we're sticking with is the higher quality. Now, there's not a lot in fixed income that we would say is cheap by any stretch, but we do think there's a little bit of complacency within that lower quality sector. And right now, we just don't think you're getting a lot of spread for risk assets. So there's not a lot of risk priced into risk assets. So we want to stay in the higher quality. We're going to clip a little bit of coupon, as you mentioned, but we also think interest rates are going to go down. I mean, we have the 10-year trending towards 4% by the end of the year. And if you have the ability to get that carry and that price appreciation in higher quality, particularly those assets that are a bit on the cheaper side, like agency MBS, then that's a great sector to really try and enhance your return without taking on too much risk.
Well, Leslie, I'm looking at the Bloomberg Index browser, INGO on the Bloomberg terminal. The best return here in fixed income is U.S. corporate high yield at 2.7%. Similar outperformance last year. Should I be looking at some of this high yield stuff?
Listen, I think, high yield has done well because the capital markets have stayed open, which is a great thing, right? We've had a lot of refinancing going on. Everyone was really concerned about the maturity walls when we came into 2024. And they've had the ability to go to the marketplace. And that's good that the capital markets are open. And it's not as though we think there's going to be some sort of catalyst, 6 or 8 months from now. It's just a question of what you're being compensated for. Yeah. And you're not being compensated a lot for high yield. So we would be opportunistic as spreads widen. And we do think that they will, particularly in the fourth quarter. But right now, you're not getting that much spread for that type of risk asset.
Do you have a yield where the cash moves? I mean, right now, what's a money market fund right now? 5.x percent? Something like that. Lisa, you just took out a 5-year CD, right?
Yes.
I mean, Leslie, when does cash move? When's the vehicle for cash to move?
Yeah, listen, we think the Fed starts cutting in September. And, it's got about a 73% chance what the market is pricing in right now. But once that starts, I think you're going to see those cash yields move very quickly because, as you know, the fixed income market's forward-looking, the Fed is backward-looking. So those cash will start to fall fairly quickly. But let's be honest. I mean, look, cash earned a seat at the table this year. There's no question. It's earned that seat.
Leslie, thank you so much. We've got to be short today with breaking news. Leslie Falconio with UBS will get her on again soon with their mid-year, I should say, view. Okay, line them up, folks. Hummer EV, 98,000. Silverado EV, 75,000. The Cybertruck, yes, Mathieu has one in order, 82,000. Ford F-150 Lightning, if you can find it, 57,000.
No, Tom, the one I drove was 94,000.
94,000. If you can find one, the coolest car on Fifth Avenue, the Rivian R1T, 72,000. We go to surveillance. I bought EV at the top of the market. Correspondent Mathieu Miller as well. What a shock from VW.
Yeah, absolutely insane, especially since VW has already sunk so many tens of millions of dollars into its EV and digitalization project. From 2023 to 2028, they have earmarked 108 billion euros for investments into EVs and digitalization. And they have really made very little progress, right? They at least don't have any exciting electric vehicles to show for it. But with this $5 billion investment in Rivian, they have just made an incredible leap. In brand recognition alone, it's really impressive.
Paul, jump in here.
So the Rivian trucks look good. What do you think?
I think they look gorgeous. I mean, the design just absolutely nailed it. I think better than pretty much any other EV product out there. And the capability is pretty unbelievable. I mean, with 15 inches of ground clearance, you can do real off-roading. Not that anyone ever will with what amounts to a $100,000 vehicle. But the quad motor has now over 1,000 horsepower.
Lisa.
That means there's one electric motor for each wheel, which is great because it's like having a limited slip differential on both axles.
Limited slip differential, Lisa.
Well, the point is it's very fast and it's got a huge range if you go with that configuration.
So, I mean, talk to us about the Tesla truck. I mean, or whatever it's called.
I mean, I saw again one driving up Park Avenue yesterday. To me, it doesn't look like a finished product. It looks like it's still a prototype, but it's got also amazing capabilities. It's got big range. It's got a huge battery, and that's really the key to big range and big power for these EVs. I mean, the Hummer EV that I'm driving right now has a 210 kilowatt hour battery.
You're driving a Hummer EV?
I'm driving a GMC Hummer EV 3X right now, which also has over 1,000 horsepower. They claim 10,000 pound-feet of torque, which is a little bit spurious, but spurious.
I want to go out 3 years or 5 years, and I give you immense credit for being intelligent about this versus the fanboy stuff I see. In 3 or 5 years, will there be a revolution where you can easily charge your card and America gets a confidence in driving EVs?
I don't think it'll happen in 3 to 5 years, but in 5 to 10 years, I think it'll be much easier. Now, if you talk to these Tesla fanatics, they're going to say it's no problem at all. But they have a supercharger network that's more developed than any other network, and
so if I spend $80,000 in a Rivian, can I charge it up right now in Manhattan?
Yes, you can, but it's going to be difficult. So, for example, the Hummer I'm driving right now only has 36 miles more of range. I park it at the plug and go parking lot across the street, and if I plug it in there and pay them the $20 they want all day long, I'm probably going to add maybe another 50 miles of range. It is that slow. Yeah. With
why are you doing this versus the Lamborghini you used to drive?
I'm just testing out the Hummer this week. It's actually a very impressive vehicle.
So are we gonna have a digital thing from you?
I'm gonna bring it into the courtyard this afternoon. We're gonna film it. But the key right now, I think the most interesting fact about these electric vehicles is the massive depreciation hit you take if you buy one. If Paul had bought that $100,000 Ford F-150 Lightning, it's a very impressive truck, but it would be worth $50,000 today. So he would have lost half his money in less than a year.
I got YouTube live chat blowing up with Matt Miller, belt and suspenders. The open interest, 9 a.m. coming up. Beard or no beard?
It's going to be a beard for now because I took the promo photos in a beard, and the powers that be said, we want consistency. Don't change it. Either you have a beard or we don't care, but keep it the same. So
there we go. Right, news you can use. Mathieu Miller, thank you so much. Nice of you to come in. 7:25 early for you.
Yeah, I know,
it's too much.
Well, you had the Hummer just speeding down the.
I'm Rivian. Mathieu Miller, stay with us. Hot Pursuit is the podcast from New York City. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mathieu. We've got a mix of red and green on the screen. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.1%, but Dow futures down 0.2% or 90 points. S&P futures little change, down about 2 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.73%, down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%, and that is up 3 basis points. Now, after a solid auction of 2-year treasuries yesterday, today the U.S. will sell $70 billion of 5-year notes. That's happening later today. To earnings we go. General Mills, you know, the parent behind brands including Cheerios, Haagen-Dazs, down more than 4%. The company's fourth quarter revenue fell short of estimates. It also offered soft guidance. And companies making news, General Motors down 0.5%. The company hired a new CEO to lead its Cruise robo-taxi service. That would be Mark Whitten. He's one of the key engineers behind the Xbox video game console. And since we're talking robo-taxis, a Bugatti maker unveiled a 2-seat autonomous taxi that it wants to have on the roads in 2026. It has no steering wheel, sliding doors, and it's said to have more space than a Rolls Royce. Very fancy.
Please.
That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Cost
Tom and Paul.
$250,000. Lisa Mathieu, thank you. so much. All I can say about Rivian is they got an Apple CarPlay workaround. You spend $259 and you can get Apple CarPlay into Rivian. It's news you can use. Good morning on YouTube. Search and subscribe Bloomberg Podcast. This is really important. Brian Weiser didn't work directly with Don Draper, but he was directly involved in the Think Small and Lemon ads for VW years ago, and he joins us today. And I mean, you know, we've got guys like Michael Nathanson, Buy, Hold, Sell, and what are the companies doing? But somebody thinking about what we do in our living rooms. Nobody owns a high ground like Brian Weiser.
Brian Weiser, he's a principal at Madison and Waltham. And you know what? You know where the big media mucky-mucks, they go to Cannes. In France last week. It's June in the south of France. Doesn't get any better than that. And that's where the big media folks were. And that includes Brian. Brian, you were in Cannes last week. That's where, again, global Madison Avenue advertisers and big companies and the big marketing directors from around the world descend upon Cannes. What was the feeling there amongst these big companies, these big advertisers, about the state of the economy and so on? What's their view?
Well, I think it's safe to say that ebullient would be a good word. Positive, optimistic. Things are good. I mean, as I've been pointing out, like the ad market is really strong right now. Marketers, I mean, I haven't gone through General Mills numbers, but you know, most packaged goods companies are still spending a lot of money on advertising. Auto companies are spending more money on advertising.
Where are they spending it? Just on digital?
Digital is absolutely taking share, but the likes of retail media players like Amazon, I mean, Amazon's port, and it is a port, is pretty massive there. So anything retail media, you know, Chase had like a retail media presence there, like they're selling ads. Everyone's selling ads.
For our listeners and viewers, this could be like a 3-hour conversation. The turmoil is so great. You put out a memo this morning that nails it. We hate ads. So what are we doing versus ad-free streaming where we pay a premium? I pay $22 a month for YouTube Premium. Redo doesn't pick that up.
Oh, okay.
The
Very good.
I do myself. What are we doing with ad-free versus ad? And is the revolution 5 years from now for Brian Weiser that we're all ad-free and we're paying more for it?
I think that a large share of the population will absolutely take ads. I think there'll be a lot of ad exposures. They'll just be in different places. And let's separate what's going on with the video world from the broader advertising world. I mean, the strongest form of advertising I can by far is outdoor advertising.
Wow.
Like easily the most impactful ads. You see it. You see any company that's marketing itself with outdoor billboards. There's plenty of reasons why we all get exposed to ads. That's not the same as getting exposed to a TV ad where you're sitting down for an hour program, you get 12 minutes or 14 or 16 minutes of ads. Those days are kind of gone. There will be some consumption like that, like sports. Sports programming, disproportionately important and only growing in importance for linear TV. And you're still going to get hit with a ton of ads. And the relative value of those ads goes up and up and up and up and up because of its relative advantage to everything else. But yeah, to your point, when it comes to watching general long-form entertainment content, the growing share of viewing is going to be in ad-free environments, even as ad tiers become more popular.
So, Tom, as you well know, Tom, in May of every year, the big broadcast and cable networks get together in New York for what's called the upfronts, where they sell a lot of their advertising time for the following season. Did that happen this year? Is it even relevant anymore?
I mean, I hear the parties are still good.
Okay, the parties are still good.
No, I haven't been to one in a while. But no, it does still happen. And I think you could argue that it's nowhere near as important as it was in an era when you needed to create a sense of urgency around negotiations and a sense of getting all the agency groups and their clients to come to an agreement to commit money concurrently. Think about when you sell a house, right? What does your real estate broker want you to do? They want to make sure you maximize the number of people in the showing at one time rather than spreading it out. Same is true when you sell TV programming. The whole point of the upfront presentations was always create excitement about specific programs, causing people to have that FOMO, right? That's really hard to do now when a popular program has barely a 1.0 or 1% of the population watching.
So if you're a media company, traditional media company, a Disney, Paramount, or Warner Brothers, and you still have a lot of exposure to broadcast and cable television, is there any future for that business?
Not if they keep doing what they've been doing, they'll get what they're about to get, which is negative decline.
Well, let me go to buy, hold, sell, which you don't do. Goldman Sachs yesterday put out a Paramount sell, and it was 10, and they say 9-ish, whatever the number is. I don't have it in front of me. Would you buy, hold, sell right now on Warner Brothers Discovery, Paramount, or the other losers in this game?
I think you really want to see someone who has a real strategic vision about what exactly they're going to do.
But the New York Times article, Barry Diller, Brian Roberts, and the rest, they said there's no strategic vision. Where's the Brian Weiser strategic vision?
I mean, there are pathways. I've certainly been writing about possible pathways, right? I mean, finding a way to become platforms, get out of the definition of being television.
Is that Amazon is leading the way?
I think Amazon is helping for sure, but I think that, for example, if you're a TV network, let Amazon, let Walmart, let any retailer sell all of your ad inventory. They will absolutely be able to make more money for you than if you do it yourself, as an example. Partnering with the Pinterest, the Snaps, the Reddits, those guys are going to find that they're not able to sustain double-digit growth very soon. There's lots of opportunities for partnerships there.
At Fidelity, one of their major holdings is Meta, which I call Facebook. How quaint. Maybe I should call it Instagram. Give us a Brian Weiser Facebook update.
I mean, they continue to go from strength to strength. There's nothing getting in the way of products like Advantage Plus, which is their AI-based product. It's growing massively. Basically, it's set it and forget it. Nobody really cares about the privacy issues or what happens to kids on the platform.
Lisa, are you on Facebook?
I am on Facebook, yeah.
Of course she is. Are there ads?
There are tons of ads, and my husband always buys stuff from those ads.
Oh, is that right? Oh, so they work.
It hooks you in, and they work, yes.
Yeah, they keep doing a really good job commercially speaking, right? And so you get like even WhatsApp becoming a commercial platform for small businesses. No, they're going from strength to strength, but Alphabet, Amazon, no stopping them right now.
How do you respond to what Paul and I observe? YouTube and Netflix. That's it. How do you respond to that?
It means you're consuming that primarily.
What I'm observing out there is basic. Shogun shows up and somebody watches this for 10 days. But help me. All I see is two winners. A duopoly.
Well, no, again, I think that Meta is in a really good position. Not that they necessarily have a guarantee that they're going to end up in the same place 5 or 10 years from now. But you've got to include them, you've got to include Amazon. As long as they continue to invest in their platform, they'll probably grow. I mean, this is the crazy thing that I found when I rebuilt a bunch of models in this capacity. The companies that invest, shocker, grow. Those who try to cut, return too much to shareholders, probably won't.
So where does Disney fall into that? I mean, a lot of folks are trying to figure that out. I think most people feel like they're going to be a winner. They're going to be there along with the YouTubes and the Netflix. But
they've at least got the parts to kind of see themselves through, right? Same with Comcast, right? They've got the cable business or the broadband distribution business. I think that those companies are fine, and they'll be there to pick up the pieces.
We don't care about any of this. All we want to know is what is the value add of Michael Barr, Lisa Mathieu, Paul Sweeney, and me in Keene.
You guys should totally be there.
Remote?
I mean, first thing,
we need Keith Grossman back.
The two biggest new things in Cannes that I think are going to cause the lines to grow bigger and bigger: sports marketing and influencers. And influencers.
Were they there, the influencers?
Oh, God, yeah.
Is Lisa Mathieu an influencer?
Can I count?
Influences me.
Well, no, but people are recording podcasts all over the place. What's Taylor Swift's boyfriend's name?
Kelsey.
Yeah, his podcast, he was doing it live there. There are tons of people doing this live podcast from there. But the influencer thing, in all seriousness, there were creators, broadly defined, which includes a lot of people producing podcasts or content like what you produce. Absolutely, you should be there.
20 seconds, New York Times podcast paywall.
Bad idea. I think podcasts probably are better as ad-supported products.
Ad-supported.
That's what we're doing, and we're humbled by it. Thank you to Cadillac.
And the really good advertisers are on
this thank you to Cadillac, among others.
Exactly.
For advertising.
Isn't that amazing? All the advertisers that used to be on broadcast television are now doing podcasts.
They're very excited about podcasts and high-quality podcasts, B2B in particular.
You see, Lisa, how the shoulders in his suits are different than what Brian Weiser used to wear? He goes to Keene, and he's like...
He's been drinking rosé for a week.
The guy on the cover of Bloomberg Business Week. He's gone Arnaud on us.
Yep.
He's gone Louis Vuitton on us.
Yep.
Brian Weiser, thank you so much. Brilliant stuff. We protect the copyright of our guests. Go to Madison and Wall for Brian Weiser brilliance. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Results are in from some key primary contests across the country. Let's begin in New York with this report from Bloomberg's John Tucker.
In New York's closely watched 16th congressional Democratic primary, pro-Israel moderate George Latimer comes out on top. defeating incumbent Jamal Bowman, a member of the Progressive Squad in Congress. It became the most expensive House primary in U.S. history. Vladimir's victory speech was an appeal for unity.
We turn a page and we say that we believe in inclusion of everybody in our representation.
Bowman's defeat signals a significant blow to liberals who've been trying to push the party farther left. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
Besides New York, 3 other states held congressional primaries, and Republican candidates backed by Donald Trump came up short in 2 of them. In South Carolina's 3rd District, Sherry Biggs defeated Mark Burns in a runoff election 51% to 49%. Biggs is a political newcomer who was backed by South Carolina's governor. Burns is a black pastor who was supported by Donald Trump for nearly a decade, though the former president did not campaign for him. In Utah, the race for Mitt Romney's open Senate seat goes to Congressman John Curtis. He won with 50.7%, defeating a Trump-endorsed mayor, Trent Staggs, and 2 other Trump-supporting candidates. In Colorado, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert won her bid for re-election after switching districts to run for retiring Ken Buck's open House seat. Boebert defeated several lesser-known candidates with 43.4% of the vote. In Australia, cheers greeted WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, now a free man, as he returned to his homeland. He landed in a chartered jet hours after pleading guilty to obtaining and publishing U.S. military secrets, ending his U.S. legal battle. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And Michael Barr, thanks so much. Cruel, unusual punishment, Paul. I mean, Kevin Gordon with us yesterday with Schwab.
Yep.
And he mentions Hamburger America.
I know.
He has the audacity out on social. Lisa, you talk about an influencer. I mean, he's got Hamburger America with this gorgeosity of a Hamburg with fries that don't look like they were dripped in grease and some Heinz action. I mean, Lisa, it says road trip this weekend.
Downtown?
We can do it. We can do
Yep.
it. Does it have a beer with it? Can you get a beer with it?
I think
You can get a Miller High Life, the champagne.
Oh.
Would you eat a
bottled
hamburger?
years.
I totally would, yeah.
You would? Okay, wow.
Oh, my
I
word.
do
We can
burgers.
witness the Mathieu, the annual hamburger.
Getting away from the plant food. All right.
This is unfair. I mean, I could see us doing a remote with Schwab, Liz Ann Saunders, Kevin Gordon.
Yeah,
You know,
get
down
that
at
sponsored. It would be
Hamburger
Yeah,
America,
exactly.
brought to you by Charles Schwab. Thank you, Kevin Gordon. I hate you for putting that photo out on Twitter. I think we're going to have to be there this weekend. Okay, where are we? Right on the screen. NASDAQ, it's always up. NVIDIA's up, I
Yeah,
guess.
exactly.
I
That's
don't
all you need to know.
FedEx seriously is up. For all of you looking at fundamentals, FedEx has a better than good quarter. Lisa Mathieu, among others, will give you some wisdom on that here. Coming up. The Sweeney yield, 4.73%. On the 2-year yield, I'm looking at the real yield, 10-year real yield, 2.05%. We follow the yen. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mathieu. A little movement in futures this morning. NASDAQ futures, little change, up about 14 points. We have Dow futures down 0.2%, 98 points. S&P futures, little change, down about 3. We have the 2-year yield at 4.73%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%. That's up 4 basis points. We go to currencies. Japanese yen, 160.32 against the dollar. And we head over to Bitcoin. Right now, it's lower at 61,370. Commodities, we have spot gold lower at $2,311 an ounce, Brent crude $85 a barrel, WTI crude $81 a barrel. To AI, we have to talk about it every day, right? You'll have to wait a little bit longer for that highly anticipated voice assistant feature for ChatGPT. OpenAI delaying the release because of safety issues. And we just had Matt Miller here talking about EVs, so I'll tell you this. Ferrari, they plan to offer this extended warranty service for its next generation of hybrid electric supercars. Sources say it's going to cost about $7,500 a year to cover the cost of replacing a battery if you have an issue with it. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. I'm glad you brought that up. Lisa, Paul, what'd you make of the man? I mean, seriously, we bust his chops, but Miller's really put some time and energy
my goodness.
into
Yeah,
this.
he is all over the global
And you've
auto
driven
business.
it. My closest ignorance here is I was in a London cab that was electric, and I thought it was a Bentley.
Yeah.
But what do you think? What's your take?
I mean, the electric vehicle that I drove, and again, a Ford F-150 Lightning sticker, $94,000. It was an awesome vehicle from performance to everything else. So, I mean, the technology is certainly there. It's just, there's a million variables here. Pricing, got to get the pricing down. You got to be able to charge this thing almost as easily as you fill up your tank with gas. So there's a lot of things that have to happen. I think Matt's probably right. Broader adoption is a 5 to 10 year story, maybe not a 2 to 5 year story.
The issue is not to get a Rivian down under 72,000. They got to come up with a Chinese EV car, or let something like the Chinese EV cars into America.
Yeah, exactly. And
what do you think? 32,000?
Yeah, I think so. And whether that's going to be a Tesla or a Ford or a Volkswagen, I don't know. But they're all working on it. Maybe not as quickly as they initially thought. But yeah, I think it's a trend, certainly.
Well, we'll have to see.
So, I mean, we follow Matt Miller on social media to keep up on all this stuff.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Oh, the front page is the Lisa Mathieu Show. It's brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Discover the future of trading with their next generation trading platform, IBKR Desktop. Download IBKR Desktop at ibkr.com/desktop. Lisa Mathieu, there's like a lot of choices today.
There is, and this is the hot button topic in New York, congestion pricing. Some drivers are against it. But here's the thing, there's a report out that's saying it could put about 100,000 jobs at risk. Here's the reason why. Okay, it's from watchdog group Reinvent Albany. So basically it's saying if we don't get the funding that was expected from this plan, thousands of high-paying jobs in New York could be lost. We're talking about these jobs that are created by private companies that work with the MTA to build like the trains, the buses, install those new propulsion systems. They average about 100,000 per year. That's their average salary. The results were based on this analysis of MTA spending, data from Partnership for New York, but it just shows what the other side of it, the loss of jobs that could happen if this doesn't go through.
For what you guys have read, is it just a question of the $15 statistic? And they just got to come back with a lower number? I don't know.
I don't know. I just think, I think it, quote unquote, works in London.
It works in London and Stockholm, no question about
And they've had
that.
it for more than, I would say, a decade or so in London.
My answer is New York is not London.
Yeah.
Do they charge as much?
I don't know the number.
Sort of, but
it's
a whole
material.
different thing.
It is.
What a conundrum, I guess is how I'd put it.
It's a tough one, especially for the Jersey
Tucker's
ones.
age, John Tucker's age.
Oh, yeah, it's put years on him.
Reporter. Next, what do you got? What else?
Big day today for Delta. They're opening that new luxury lounge at JFK. Terminal 4. 40,000 square feet. It fits about 513 people in there, or over 500 people. But they're hoping it's going to give some competition to like the Emirates, the global carriers, instead of just, United and American.
Are they going to limit the attendance?
Here's the thing. The only ones who can get in are those that have same-day business or first-class boarding passes on Delta or their partners. It's only open from 4:30 a.m. to 11 p.m., so those overnight travelers won't be able to go. But you got to see the pictures on the terminal from this Bloomberg article. I mean, sit-down restaurants, bakery, market, wellness spa.
Oh, look at this thing.
Soundproof work pods, valet services.
I'm not a lounge guy.
Okay.
Are you a lounge guy?
You do?
I used to be in Heathrow, full disclosure. I never go to the lounges in London. I go to the Royal Family Tea Place, Fortnum and Mason. I go to Fortnum and Mason and order the same thing, and Redo goes, "What did you do?" Keeper of the
How many
Annex.
people did you have at this thing? I do the lounges when I'm in Europe, but I don't do them in the U.S. at all.
No? Okay.
All right.
Last time I did a standing room only. It was terrible.
Well, that's what the problem is, that they're too crowded. But that's why this one is 40. I mean, you could fit over 500 people in it.
Eric, can we get Ed Bastian on, the CEO of Delta? He's done a great job on this, and he really survived COVID. And let's try to get Ed Bastian on so we can do a remote from the lounge, the bakery at the lounge. Next.
It looks really nice. Okay, this one is from Business Insider. So a lot of companies globally are trying to shorten the work week, but Greece is actually going in the opposite direction. They want to increase it to 6 days a week. So it starts Monday. It's voluntary for companies, but 6 days or 48-hour work weeks. Certain industries like retail, agriculture, service sectors, and they'll get paid for it. So you have the workers receiving 40% more pay for those extra hours, 115% more pay if they do it for a holiday.
Well, that's the thing. They're getting paid for the extra hours.
Yeah, they're getting paid
shocked.
for it. So,
wow, look at the Greeks.
So you can split it. You can work either 2 hours extra a day, or you can work that full, 6th day. So they have the option. But some people were against it. There was a lot of backlash from trade unions for it. But it puts a lot of pressure.
Kill the traditional work week.
It puts a lot of pressure on.
Shout out! I've had a Greek moment here at the Javits Center in New York. The summer fancy food show, which is like 60 years old. And Mrs. Keene knows a whole bunch of people of the Greek persuasion. I was getting lectured last night, and I think it's Kyros tomato paste. There's only one tomato paste. You have to have this Greek tomato paste because they work 6 days a week at the factory making this tomato. I don't know.
So now when are you booking the trip to Greece?
I'm booking the trip to Greece to go to 58th Street, Maria Loy. Maybe I'll darken the door to a restaurant.
There you go.
We'll have to see. But yeah, we are. Well, I've never been to Greece, and I feel remiss
Me neither.
about that. So,
I know. We've been wanting to do it.
Brahma went to Crete, which was great.
She's a globetrotter.
True globetrotter. There
Next,
you go.
what do you got?
This, actually, we were just talking about this with Brian Weezer. New York Times reportedly moving some of their podcasts behind a paywall. This is according to the Wall Street Journal, but you heard what Brian Weezer had to say about it. But they're looking for certain revenue beyond just ads. So we'll see if this works. This is just all in talks. This is according to the Journal. So they want to make certain episodes of their top-rated podcasts only available to subscribers. Maybe making those archived podcasts only available to subscribers. So certain little perks, but it could expand. They could expand that paywall to the goal of eventually making most everything.
I talked to one of the younger generation with real experience on this with some of the people that helped with the Bloomberg podcast. And she said the only thing that's going to work are sponsors like we have, Cohn Resnick, Interactive Brokers, and the others, BNY Mellon, where they're really committed to the product. All the rest of the gimmicks won't raise enough revenue. But I'm really proud of our podcast ads. I mean, people say there's too many ads, but that's what it takes to get, Lisa Mathieu on
to
air.
keep it for free.
The New York Times has done a wonderful job with their paywall. I mean, you could say in terms of the newspapers globally, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the FT, a very handful of publications have been able to really thrive with a paywall here.
Lisa Mathieu, with our newspapers today in the front pages and the headlines as well. I've been thinking here, like trailing royalties, this song was like a huge hit. But, what's really important here, can you imagine the royalties every time this song is played at a hockey game or a football game or a base? I mean, it must be just like, it's like ginormous. Pat Benatar from a few years ago. This song's bigger than it used to be. Lisa loves this because The Rock's favorite song.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mathieu on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mathieu. For Global Wall Street this entire half hour, Dominic Konstam will join us in a moment. Thrilled to have him in from Mizuho. We'll get right to that this morning. Hugely anticipated in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. Bloomberg Surveillance this Wednesday, brought to you by Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. See how business strategies from the world of golf can help your company build competitive advantage. Watch The Business of Golf, the series at CohnReznick.com/golf. Let me spell that, CohnReznick. CohnReznick.com/golf. We're watching Japanese intervention. We'll get to that with Dr. Konstam here in a moment. Lots of other stuff going on. Paul, your observation on tech to the moon, they rebounded yesterday nicely.
Yeah, they sure did in the afternoon. So we had a nice trade up led by our good friends at NVIDIA. I guess that sell-off, Tom, that was it?
That was it. That was our drawdown again.
It was
a massive constant correction that we saw over the last 6 hours or whatever it is. We're on YouTube. Subscribe, search Bloomberg Podcasts. On Apple CarPlay, you can get it in Rivian with an add-on as well. I learned that today. With our from the Interactive Broker Studios with our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mathieu.
You got it. Yeah, Wall Street's tech-driven rally that was driven by NVIDIA's rebound from a $430 billion rout. Well, it seems to be running out a little bit of a steam right now. Nasdaq futures only up 0.1%, 20 points. Dow futures down 0.2%, 82 points. We have S&P futures little change, down just a point. Now we have NVIDIA shares. Just checking with them, up another 2%. To the bond market, the 2-year yield, 4.73%. That is little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's up 3 basis points. To currencies, have to point out Japanese yen, 160.33 against the dollar. Moving the markets, you talked about it. EV maker Rivian shares now up 41%. Got that financial lifeline thanks to that new partnership with Volkswagen, which is going to invest about $5 billion in the company. Shares of FedEx, they're up 14%. Profits beat estimates, and the firm also hinted at a divestiture of its freight business. And then after the bell, we get some more earnings. We get Levi Strauss, Paychex, and NVIDIA rival Micron Technology. Their shares actually up nearly 3% right now. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Joining us right now, someone who's definitive. I mentioned Michael Mauboussin, and only in that category with him is Dominic Konstam. A tour of duty here, there, Credit Suisse for years with Ira Jersey, and now holding court with Steve Rasciuto over at Mizuho Securities. Dr. Konstam joins us for this entire half hour. I got to rip up the script, do an audible here. I'm going to quote Rudiger Dornbusch at MIT, but there could be many others, including your Cambridge and Oxford. Intervention and unilateral intervention doesn't work. What's Japan's solution to the trilemma they have that they've stumbled into post-COVID?
Well, I guess the best thing that you can hope for, they can hope for, is that they can have some sustainable increases in their short-term interest rates and normalize those on the back of obviously having a sustainable outlook for inflation, and then that will allow basically the yen to finally find a sort of equilibrium.
If you get a higher interest rate regime, I believe that means, help me here, Paul, yield up, price down.
That's what they tell me.
Is it a devaluation, a depreciation of the wealth of Japan?
Well, to some extent. I mean, when you have when the currency is weakening, there's obviously a terms of trade effect, which means the real income of the Japanese people, in some sense, will be less in sort of global terms. So there's definitely a depreciation, from that side of things. But at the same time, I mean, at the end of the day, their potential growth is very low. There's a lot of damage has been done with very low negative inflation over the years. And that creates all sorts of social tensions.
Critical. One final question on this. They have an experiment of reflation to get away from the cultural decades of disinflation and outright deflation. Dr. Konstam, is that experiment failed?
No, I think it's too soon to say. I think you can be sort of somewhat optimistic that Japan is getting out of its hole. I mean, you've now taken interest rates back to like 2010, 2011 levels. You know, there's the lost. You know, there's been a lost decade. There were lost decades before, sort of thing. But they've kind of got themselves out of that hole. So I think the outlook for Japan is somewhat constructive, especially if they can get a virtuous circle of wage inflation and price inflation, albeit at low levels, that keeps a positive interest rate. I mean, positive interest rates, are a good thing in terms of return on capital, and they'll support risky asset markets as well. So that's kind of the idea, this sort of adjustment. And Japan, traditionally has been obviously a big exporter of capital because there haven't been opportunities at home in Japan, and that's why they've had this sort of massive current account surplus, and over time that's obviously is correcting in a hopefully sustainable way.
So we see the yen, weakening again here today at 160 spot 35. I mean, what does it tell you about the Japanese economy, I guess?
Well, I think right now, I mean, the issue for the yen is obviously that the US is not, is sort of fighting the sort of argument, or the Fed at least is fighting the argument that they don't want to sort of be cutting rates right now. Right. So that obviously puts some pressure on the Japanese. The intervention the Japanese, would be or have done and might have to do again is more about sort of just slowing the process of this sort of yen finding its ultimate bottom for what will be a sort of a new trading range, no doubt, when they also have sustainably raised interest rates. And so I wouldn't worry too much, from that perspective, as long as the moves are relatively orderly. And the problem that they've got is obviously, they're intervening on the kind of wrong side. They've got limited reserves. They can't sort of spend, hundreds of billions in terms of defending the currency. They only have $1 trillion or so, if you like. So they'll get through that pretty quickly if they're not careful. So I think it's not a disaster at the moment. It's just sort of trying to keep the moves sort of contained.
Before we get to the U.S. and the U.S. Federal Reserve, talk to us about what we're seeing in the U.K. and in Europe.
Well, I think what you're seeing is something that you're seeing in other countries as well, which is obviously the tremendous dissatisfaction in the sort of working population. The underlying sort of real income growth isn't really strong enough to deliver the kind of living standards that people aspire to. There's obviously a lot of, the headline numbers look great, but they're flattered by relatively sort of small small groups of industries with very large companies. And I think that's why you have all these pressures around immigration, and you have people going to the extremes, and you're seeing that in both the UK and France.
This is really critical. I'm going to go to Meghdad Desai at London School of Economics, his classic Marxist revenge. They're going to say it's exploitation of the underclass in France, in Germany, United States, even in America with this debate coming up. Do central banks have to adjust to the bipolar or barbell reality of their societies?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, and this is a sort of thing that the ECB has been challenged with in the past. In the end, they set interest rates for the weakest link in the system. They had to set rates, for example, for Italy to make sure that they could sort of be part of the euro zone. And it's the same sort of questions that are going to happen, in our country and in Europe. What does the central bank do when there are a lot of people who are thoroughly miserable? If you've got full employment.
To get this in before we get to Michael Barr and Dr. Konstam coming back with us nationwide across the world, Dominic Konstam with us with Mizuho. The fact is Jerome Powell's got to go out to Jackson Hole in an election year with a strategy. Do you and Steve Rasciuto observe a strategy at the Echoes building?
Yeah, I don't think there is a great strategy. They're sort of literally winging it from sort of one round of data to the next, and that's a bit of a sort of concern. And the risk they run, obviously, is they're not going to be preemptive to anything, and they'll end up sort of with a bigger mess on their hands. I think, in a way, the ECB has done well to basically to show that you can knock a little bit off rates and not commit to an easing cycle, although that's a kind of expectation. And I think in a sense that's where the Fed will end up going as well.
I think they're massively ex post. We'll have to see. Dominic Konstam will continue with us here worldwide and across the nation on YouTube, on Apple CarPlay, on Android Auto. Red and green on the screen right now. The VIX exactly 13.00. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. The Supreme Court is expected to issue several major decisions this week, starting today. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
The court has already said it is prepared to extend its session into July. That's an unusual move, but there are more rulings to announce. Among them, a ruling on former President Trump's claim that he is immune from prosecution for alleged crimes committed while in office. Other decisions include cases on the obstruction charges against the January 6th Capitol rioters and abortion access in medical emergencies. The court has decisions coming down today, tomorrow, Friday, and possibly next week. We do expect to hear today's rulings starting at 10 this morning. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Moderates claim the victories in some of the latest primary races across the country. Progressive Squad member Jamal Bowman lost his primary in New York to George Latimer, who had major backing from the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And Trump-backed candidates lost in the race for Utah Senator Mitt Romney's seat and in a runoff election in South Carolina. Bloomberg government's Jonathan Tamari has the results in New York and means that it could send a message to Democrats.
We've seen over time that Democratic voters and Democrats succeed with more moderate candidates. Biden himself is an example of that, right? I mean, he beat Bernie Sanders, was his main rival, who he defeated in the Democratic primary in 2020. And so you see that is still how Democrats win.
As for Republicans, Bloomberg government's John Tamari says the result in Utah could be an outlier since that state tends to be less supportive of former President Trump. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin warned that a war between Israel and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah would have terrible consequences as the Biden administration struggles to avert a wider conflict in the Middle East. Austin spoke at the Pentagon alongside Israel's defense minister, who is visiting Washington this week. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael, thanks so much. Michael McKee coming in because Pharaoh is not here.
I haven't seen that. I can't remember the last time
He's
I saw
doing a
that guy.
Ripley thing. He's on the Amalfi Coast.
Okay.
You know, he's like in a boat I can't afford.
Yep.
And he's staying at the Santa Catarina, which is
Okay.
like world class. It's like $2,000 a night. I
Well,
mean, it's just
he's a player.
He's living large. Denmark gets to go ahead of Slovenia in the UEFA, I think it's
is that? I don't
UEFA
know.
soccer Group
Soccer.
C, because they get to go ahead because the Slovenia assistant coach Milivoje Novakovic got a
try.
yellow card.
And that, you can't
They
do that?
were so close that it came down to a yellow card of an assistant coach.
Look at Ariel with
And
pronunciation.
we can't provide perspective.
We can't.
Because Pharaoh's stuck in
Pharaoh's
a
not here.
2,000
I
night
mean, who do
hotel.
we have? We have nobody here.
Nobody. We got
have
nobody.
here.
Denmark ahead of Slovenia in the UEFA Group C. Thank you for that, Mike McKee, and I greatly appreciate that. When's Pharaoh return? It's like,
I'm looking
we
at
think
his
in
out.
July.
It could be tomorrow, but I don't know. But I mean, and then you get into July and August, and he's European, so we'll never see him again.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. Anyways, there you are. Some soccer talk. That's what we do. We had to, Dominic was here, so we had to
Why
do
don't we take the
soccer
month
talk.
of August off like Europeans do?
They do.
Why
Dominic
didn't
is the
that
same
come
way.
across
Takes
the
the whole
ocean?
damn month. Rashudo's working like 7 days a week, and Konstam is taking, well, I think I'll work 1 week in August. I mean,
Of course.
they're smarter
They're
than we are.
way smarter than we are.
Way better. At least is taking notes.
Yeah.
Red and green on the screen. All right, now we're going to come back with Dominic Konstam. Really important conversation linking in his economics into what we see within the markets. From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mathieu. We have little movement in futures this morning. NASDAQ futures seeing just a slight lift up about 4 points. Dow futures down 0.2%, 86 points. S&P futures little change, down about 4 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.73%, down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%. That's up 3 basis points. To currencies, the Japanese yen 160.34 against the dollar. We go to Bitcoin right now. It's lower at 61,375. More economic data out today. We have new home sales for May. That comes out at 10 a.m. Wall Street time. Tomorrow we move on to durable goods, initial jobless claims, and GDP, but all focus is on Friday with PC inflation, spending, and income. Shares of British food delivery company Deliveroo higher, up 3% in London. Jeffrey said that report on DoorDash's interest in a takeover, well, it could only be the start. DoorDash up about 1%. News from Paramount Global. The company says it's talking with potential international streaming partners. Their shares down 0.5%. And if you're tired of those long lines in Disney, well, it's announced a new paid ride reservation system to its Florida theme parks. It's going to allow visitors to reserve a space for those shorter lines as much as 1 week in advance. Disney shares little change. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
And what's that going to cost?
Probably about $15
Yeah,
for a thing.
Is a bolt on to
there's
whatever.
always a price tag attached to it. Depends on how many rides you want. And
Yeah.
you know,
On foreign exchange for
confusing.
global Wall Street, lira, we had 33 yesterday in Turkish lira. Things are walking away. Philippine peso walking away. Damien Sassar on top of this. We just had euro yen go out near 171 plus 171.41. Lisa mentioned dollar yen out to 160 now. DXY, the blended index of major partners, really begins to get near 106. We're watching foreign exchange this morning. We are honored here at Surveillance across the nation on YouTube worldwide. Dominic Konstam of Mizuho with us. Just simply post-pandemic, do we have a new higher rate regime? Or, and this is the new in thing I'm seeing, Dominic, we're going to have an asymptote. We're going to have an asymptotic x-axis where we're just going to go and out glide path, wait and wait and wait to get back to 2%.
Yeah, I think we do have a higher rate regime, mainly driven by potential growth being higher, and that's going to be the productivity story with AI. And what's interesting about that is that's more about learning by doing rather than relying on very high investment rates. And that's a different kind of productivity than we saw in the late 90s. I think the issue, though, is in order to secure this, we mustn't have too hard a landing coming out of this tightening cycle. So we've talked about the Fed being very restrictive. We've talked about the progress on bringing inflation down. The way inflation has come down is very interesting. It's been really driven initially by the supply-driven side. And it's important that the Fed doesn't kill the demand side too much through their, if you like, lack of patience in some sense, or sort of just waiting, too long, if you like, because they think the economy is absolutely fine. They need to start sort of moving, I think, more quickly.
So, I mean, there's a lot of folks in academia and in the markets that think this Fed is already behind the curve. That the data, the real-time data suggests that they should be cutting like yesterday. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think when you look at the labor market, you're now at the point of a cusp in the labor market where the demand for labor, let's say reflected in vacancies, has come down quite a lot. And you're actually back to the beverage curve kink, if you like, the old beverage curve before COVID. And that's a trade-off between vacancies and unemployment. And if you keep having vacancies fall, there's a real risk that unemployment will start to rise much more quickly. This is a debate that Larry Summers had with Chris Waller on the Fed a couple of years ago. Kind of Larry Summers got it a little bit wrong, I think, but Waller was correct. But now you're at the point where it doesn't matter the arguments whether they were slightly wrong or not. The message is that unemployment might well start rising much more quickly than you want it to.
This goes back to the insight in the last section, in that there is an exploitation of capitalism where there's the have-nots not participating in Dominic Konstam's new productivity. I mean, Paul's the heart of the matter.
Yep.
There's only so many people advantaged by this technology, AI, EIO, and the rest of it.
Exactly. So what's the market telling us here about the Fed and what they should be doing? I mean, we came into the year thinking 6 rate cuts. Now, I don't know, we're 1 or 2 or something like that.
Well, to be fair to the Fed, I mean, although they scaled back what they initially expected they would do this year, they've been pushing it, further out. So in terms of the cumulative amount of easing, they haven't, there's just a timing issue.
Okay.
But what's interesting more recently is people are now putting bets that if the Fed is going to start easing, they may end up cutting the rates a lot. So we call that skew in the options market. That existed at the beginning of this year. It kind of went away, but now it's coming back. So that just tells you people are getting nervous that this delay in the Fed, to get going, is going to just leave them behind the curve, and they're going to have to be sort of running to catch up. And that's where you get really worried about, a harder landing. We've always talked about a harder landing than necessary. You don't need to have a hard landing. That's why just, taking some of the edge off this restrictive policy would be helpful.
Where would your dot be right now? It's widely known, Dominic, I'm not a Dots fan. I'm not a Dots fan.
Yeah.
Where's the Konstam dot right now?
Yeah, well, I would definitely be in the camp of cutting 2 or 3 times this year, and then and then sort of adding another sort of 100 basis point easing at least in the sort of first half of next year. I mean, policy is restrictive. Inflation does look to me is under control, and it's the last thing you want is for it to fall below target. And there is a risk that come 2025, forget about making target, you could well be below target. And we know how kind of difficult it is to get the demand side cranking back up again once you sort of suppress it too much.
Paul was out front on this and alluded to it. We've got to end our conversation with you on the United Kingdom elections. I'm not going to mince words on the failure of Brexit. I'm having a Rudyard Kipling summer. And the idea of the imperialist, all this BS, excuse my French, I can't say that on radio, Paul, all this BS about Pax Britannica down in flames. Dominic Konstam on the failure of Brexit. How's that experiment working?
Well, I went to school with Nigel Farage. I was in the same class as Nigel Farage. There were only 6 of us. We started the investment club together. His father was very kind and helped us in terms of doing some of those trades. So I feel very close to the sort of Brexit experiment. But I have to say it's been a complete failure, and I was against it. And I'm a bit sad that Nigel went down that road. But yes, it was the British people were told things that would happen, and they didn't happen. They would, if they had to vote again, I think they would not vote the same way. But again, it does reflect an underlying discontent with the population.
I sat in London with Gordon Brown at a local labor union gathering. He invited me there, and I saw the visceral nature of labor back when it worked. Can Sir Keir get labor back to what Blair and Brown did for the nation?
I hope so. I mean, I think there's a good chance. He's done a lot of good things, I think, to the Labour Party to make it more of a sort of mainstream type party. So where the Labour has really been disappointing is they just took a back seat on the whole Brexit thing, and Brexit's going to hang over the UK economy for a long time to come, and that's kind of the sadness of it, really.
You've been wonderful. Dominic Konstam, thank you so much for joining us for this half hour. Dr. Konstam is with Mizuho. And look for this single best idea today. We will feature Dr. Konstam there, and of course across all of Bloomberg as well. Paul, I mean, you started an investment club. Did you use a Bloomberg terminal when you started the investment club with Nigel Farage?
No. Farage brought in, we didn't, and instead it was very physical. Farage, it was 1982, Farage brought in a bucket of silver plate because we were buying secondhand silver. Now, if you look at your Bloomberg terminal and go back to what silver prices were doing in 1982, you will see that the market was cornered, and we have still not reached those highs.
So George Soros got the idea from Nigel Farage.
Exactly. Let's just say Farage's father reimbursed us the £1,000 that we lost on our investment club.
Dominic Konstam, thank you for that. It's a surveillance rumor, Farage, called the Soros run on silver. Red and green on the screen, NASDAQ with a little bit of a lift as well. The 2-year yield, 4.73%. We are out on YouTube. Search and subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Thrilled with what we've seen there on YouTube, on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. This, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mathieu. Well, now we've got red on the screen. NASDAQ futures, little change, down about 4 points. Dow futures down 0.2%, 104 points. S&P futures down 0.1%, or 6 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.73%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, that's at 4.28%. That is up about 3 basis points. And after that solid auction of 2-year treasuries yesterday, today the U.S. will sell $70 billion of 5-year notes. That's taking place later today. Now to earnings we go. General Mills, the parent of food brands, like Cheerios, Betty Crocker, down more than 4%. Disappointing sales outlook. Shoppers are just buying less at the grocery store. And companies making news. That's General Motors down 0.2%. The company hired a new CEO. It's going to lead that Cruise robo-taxi service. Mark Whitten, he's one of the key engineers behind the Xbox video game console. And Bloomberg reporting Tesla set to lose this crown that it's held for 6 years. We're talking about outselling all EV competitors in the U.S. combined. That could be in jeopardy. Car makers slated to report second quarter sales next week. Tesla shares are little changed. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. For Global Wall Street, we are on yen intervention watch. Thank you to Dominic Konstam for perspective there, and Damian Sassower. Ben Emmons just puts out a blistering note. Paul, let me quote Emmons directly. Intervention is once again near, but to make a difference, the BOJ and Japanese officials must go bigger or go home.
Okay. From Ben Emmons, there you
There's
go.
a message from Ben Emmons. It's a blistering note, critical, I would say, of how they're doing it. And the change here, as Dominic Konstam said, of a higher interest rate environment as well. Economic indicators, important economic indicators coming up here Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, always brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with a 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio, small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support and technology. And we thank Commonwealth day after day, their leadership in supporting our economic coverage. On economics, Sarah Wolfe now with Morgan Stanley. Sarah, what a joy to visit with Seth Carpenter the other day. You've got a collegial debate always at Morgan Stanley, but Stephen Roach invented the distinctions of argument at Morgan Stanley. What's your chief argument when all of you get together right now? What's the distinction that Sarah Wolfe brings to the U.S. economic debate?
The biggest debate that I think is happening right now is on the consumer, and that's where I have a fairly strong view, where there's a lot of focus right now on some of the weaker data points coming in on the consumer, and is the weakness at the lower end of the income distribution a canary in the coal mine, and is that what's going to pull down overall growth? In our view, I think that we are seeing significant weakness at the low end, probably recessionary-like, but the middle and high income slowdown is really just a normalization in my view, in the fundamentals. So debt service obligations, access to credit, wealth, the labor market, all of those are slowing but still holding up. And if you look at the weaker data points coming in that are reflective of this upper end consumer, they're just being pickier shoppers. They're not showing real weakness. So they're not wanting to spend on their home and as much on retail, but they're still wanting to travel and spend on cruises. And to me, that's just a consumer that behaves in a more normal environment, like what we saw pre-COVID, not a consumer that we had seen over the last couple of years that was in the boom period.
Can I suggest that the economist Paul Sweeney is led on this? Paul, you've been out front of everyone of saying, I'm sorry, the restaurants are packed.
The restaurants are packed. So, Sarah, just give us a sense here of how we should think about this U.S. consumer here. We've got, basically, it still feels like full employment. Wages are rising, yet, boy, we see and we hear a lot of concern out there still about the absolute level of prices out there. How do you think about the consumer these days?
The price level, I think, is what's really impacting consumer sentiment right now, where households still feel pretty down about inflation because the level of prices is still so much higher than pre-COVID. If you go to the grocery store, you're not thankful that egg inflation is only 3% when it was 10% last year. You're saying, oh my God, a dozen eggs is $6 right now. It used to be $3. And so the way that households think is in levels. And one of the things that we've been highlighting that has in particular been putting pressure on the lower end consumer is that the level of prices and the level of real wages are still nowhere near where they were pre-COVID. So if you think at real wage growth, for example, that's been positive for 2 years, and it's been very strong because nominal wages have been outpacing inflation. But the level of real wages, so households' real buying power is just reaching its pre-COVID level. So households really have not felt that buying power for quite a long time now. And so that's why we really don't think it's until 2025
Paul,
sustained upward pressure in real wage levels.
Paul, jump in here, because when I order, we use a lot of eggs on it. Lisa, have you eaten an egg in the last 5 years?
I eat eggs every day.
Dude,
We're an egg person. You never know with her.
I get the thing. I it's some fancy egg thing from Whole Paycheck. And I look at it, and I'm looking at these little eggs, and I'm going, $6?
Exactly.
It's a lot.
So, Sarah, what can Federal Reserve policy even do to this whole picture that we're talking about for the consumer? At the end of the day, not much, can they?
There's not that much they could do. The reality is that tight monetary policy is disproportionately affecting the lower end of the income distribution. They're the ones that feel higher interest rates immediately because they don't have all this fixed rate debt. They don't have all this wealth. They're feeling their net interest payments rising more significantly. Their access to credit is more limited. When you ask the Fed about this, they'll say that the best thing that they could do for the consumer and income inequality is to bring down inflation. But unfortunately, you have to put more pressure on the lower income households in order to get there. So it's a bit of a conundrum for the Fed.
I'll give you a conundrum. I'm going to get you in trouble now with Zentner and Carpenter. Okay, Sarah, listen to me carefully. Based on what you just said, like in 8 other countries, on November 5th, America goes in, and the broad middle class and lower class vote for one of the candidates. He's going to put Jerome Powell out on the street. Is there any history of any central bank, particularly in America, actually listening to the people that don't hold the financial assets?
It's a tricky question, and you are putting me on the spot there. I think the FOMC is going to do the best to just stick to their mandate. And so they need to just look at inflation. They need to look at maximum employment, and they're going to try to tune out the noise around the politics. And so we don't think that the election should really be impacting what the Fed's doing. I think Jerome Powell wants to end his tenure on a note with a really good reputation. And so they're just going to be focused on the incoming data going into the election, not all the other noise and what sentiment is showing. I also think that there's been this shift to look much more closely at the hard data than the soft data, because the soft data has been so influenced by what's happening politically in the U.S. and more globally with geopolitics as well.
Oh, look, Ellen Zentner just emailed me. What a shock. Paul, save the interview.
Sarah, talk to us about economic growth here. What's the Morgan Stanley call for GDP this year, next year?
Yeah, we have 2% GDP growth this year, a tick lower next year. That's coming down from 3% last year. So we do have this gradual slowing. In particular, I mean, we are tracking a pretty notable slowdown in private final domestic demand. It was about 3% in the first quarter. We have just over 2% right now. The big question we get is, how much slowdown is in line with our call versus how much slowdown is leading to an even greater slowdown than what's expected. And what I'll say is, when you look at the data and if you look at the weaker data points, they're the ones that are the interest sensitive components of the economy, the ones that should be very weak. So retail sales, so anything durable goods related, the housing market, whereas the other parts of the economy that services, for example, those are holding up much better. And so we don't think that this weakness is going to spiral out of control. The last thing I'll say is that we still have this immigration story that's propping up growth. We do see this as a downside risk to growth in 2025 after the election, because there's much stricter immigration policy in the pipeline.
Brilliant. Sarah Wolfe, thank you so much. Morgan Stanley, I hope she'll come back another time.
Oh, I'm sure.
Well, you put the politics in there, and, adults like Sarah Wolfe get, their job is not to opine.
Nope.
We haven't even mentioned the debate. You pumped?
No.
Guru was like on fire yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to be shooting him down to Atlanta, and then he's going to be right there at the debate here. So 9 p.m. start time, that's a little late.
Yeah, I agree. It's sort of like, NBA Finals or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, are you kidding me? But seriously, I mean, to me, the big point here is I'm sorry, it's a huge deal, folks. I mean,
it's so early. I think what's unusual. One of many things that's unusual is it's so early in the process. Like, even if something happens tomorrow night, will we even remember it come November?
He's long Nick, short necks with our news in New York City. Michael Barr. Oh, he's not here. Excuse me.
Where's he going to be?
Okay.
So let's talk about this trade. All right. So the trade is the Knicks get Mikal Bridges from the Nets, who's their best player, one of the top players in the league. So it's a great get for the Knicks because they want to win now. The Nets, on the other hand, complete rebuild. They've got like 16 picks, first-round picks through 2030 or something, including, I think, 4 next year. So, and next year's supposed to be a good draft class. So they're saying we're doing a complete rebuild. We tried getting all the big stars, Kyrie Irving and all that kind of stuff. That didn't work. So now we're going to go the other way, which is probably the better way. Let's just build
reminds me of the
organically.
trade San Diego made months ago, and that for somebody at Miami, that maybe this is a new trend. We'll have to see. A little bit of red on the screen. A VIX 13.14 with our news in New York City. He's real. He's tangible. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. It is one last day of prep for President Biden at Camp David for tomorrow night's debate with former President Trump. Bloomberg White House reporter Josh Wingrove has more on the president's likely attack lines.
You talk about immigration. There was a bipartisan deal in the Senate. It collapsed, and Biden has taken these executive actions, which are just going to be sort of fly traps for legal challenges. But he's going to blame Trump and saying, I'm the one that actually wants to do something on the border. You're going to hear Biden talk about abortion, no doubt. He's campaigning on trying to get Roe v. Wade restored. He, of course, would need to run the table to do that. So, a bit of a tall order, but we'll hear from that. And next year is a tax policy election, or at least next year is a tax policy year after this election.
Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove says the president could go after Trump's push to lower the corporate rate to 20%. Bloomberg's coverage of the CNN presidential debate begins tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Wall Street time, with a special edition of Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu and Kaylee Lyons in Washington and David Gura in Atlanta. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has landed in Australia, a free man for the first time in more than a decade. Assange touched down in Canberra after he was sentenced to time already served as part of a plea agreement with the U.S. Justice Department that secures his freedom. Assange's lawyer, Jennifer Robinson.
Julian has suffered for more than 14 years because of the risk of extradition to the United States. He faced 175 years in prison for publishing evidence of war crimes, human rights abuse, and U.S. wrongdoing around the world.
A U.S. federal judge in Saipan accepted Assange's guilty plea to one count of violating the Espionage Act. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
I just got it. One word. Villanova.
Yes.
Yes.
That's all this is about. Yeah. Villanova.
The gang
Discuss.
is back. It's amazing. You got four guys, that played together at Villanova. Now they're going to be back together. All of this before the draft. By the way, Atlanta is on the clock to start, in case anyone didn't know.
Will they be starting players? It's four guys on the starting five will be Villanova.
How much you want to bet they are? Because now they've got a shot to, dare me say it, to win the title.
Yes.
It could happen.
Yeah.
Let's say
Julius Randle helped.
It's about chemistry. They'll have the chemistry.
It's great.
It's exciting. I have no recollection in doing this for decades where there was excitement about the Knicks.
Yeah.
It started 8 months ago.
And they
with all
played,
their injuries.
Yeah, and they played well. They play hard every night. Everybody's pretty happy. So they just got to stay healthy.
What do you do when you have to pay for your season tickets three rows up?
Yeah.
I mean, do you
take out a mortgage on?
Take out a mortgage.
Exactly.
It's
and they sell out every single night, whether the Knicks are good or bad. Right. They sell out every night.
You want to save money? Go to the Pistons.
It's amazing. I mean, we could talk about this. It's exciting. Good morning, Madison Square Garden. From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mathieu. Right now, well, we've got red on the screen. NASDAQ futures down 0.1%. Same for S&P futures. Dow futures down 0.2%. We have the 2-year yield at 4.73%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%. That's up 3 basis points. To currencies, Japanese yen weakening to the lowest level against the dollar since December 1986. It's at 160.32 against the dollar. Over to commodities, COMEX gold lower 2,314 an ounce. We have Brent crude $85 a barrel, WTI crude $81 a barrel. We had some more Fed speak. Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook says it will be appropriate for policymakers to start cutting interest rates at some point, but she did not provide a timetable for that. We have shares of Whirlpool higher, up more than 17%. Reuters reporting that Robert Bosch considering an offer for the appliance maker. And then shares of Southwest Airlines are lower, down more than 4%. The carrier reduced its estimates for unit revenue in the second quarter, saying that's adapting to lower prices in the current environment. And to AI, well, you have to wait a bit longer for that highly anticipated voice assistant feature for ChatGPT. OpenAI, it's delaying the release due to safety issues. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom.
Lisa Mathieu, thanks so much. I have a phrase called rip up the script. It was invented by Matt Winkler. He's a founder and are you emeritus? You look very emeritus this morning. Matt Winkler with us. He's the founder of Bloomberg News. And of course, the gentleman, it's his fault, folks. That's all you got to remember. And he said to me once, just rip up the script. We're going to do that right now with Matt Winkler. We're going to talk about Arizona. This article just blew me away by Matt and his team, his entourage. They're here today. Shinpei's here and 3 interns with Matt Winkler. It's great. Matt, Greece, 15 years ago, you called me up on a weekend and you said, I don't care what you're doing. You've got to go see the Prime Minister of Greece because they're in crisis. And you said, and you wrote that Greece would come out of this malaise. And you were first before anyone I know on saying Greece could get it done. Take us back there. How did you know that Greece would excel and recover?
Thank you, Tom, for your very kind words and for acknowledging my cohort in everything I do, Shinpei, because without him, I wouldn't be where I am. The answer to your question is the bond market, Bloomberg being Bloomberg, we should be able to detect everything that is bond related. And way back in those dark days of 2015, when just about everybody said, including George Soros and Alan Greenspan, that Greece was going to default and leave the euro, the bond market said it isn't happening. And the reason why we know this is the yield on the 10-year benchmark Greek debt instrument at the time was way below its worst level in 2012, which was 3 years earlier. So if the bond market was giving you that kind of definitive picture, then you had to probe a little bit deeper and say, well, what does the bond market know? And what it knew was the Greek people, according to every survey that had been taken up to that point, showed there was no preference for drachmas, no preference for returning to the world that they inhabited before they joined the EU, and they weren't going to leave the EU. And if they weren't going to leave the EU, they were tethered to the EU, and that's why Greek debt in 2015 became the best performing asset in the world.
I got like 8 ways to go here, folks, including France, United Kingdom, all the places Winkler sent me. He looked at my, Redo, keeper of the Amex, once looked at my travels and said, Matt's not happy, Tom, with where you're traveling. We could go there like 5 different ways. Right now, though, we're going to go to Arizona. You fly into Phoenix, it's a boom economy. How can they do that if they're going to run out of water?
Well, they can do it because, first of all, their gross domestic product in the past 3.5 years is up 32% since 21. It's the first time growth has surpassed the rest of the U.S. Ever. That's measured on an annual basis. But a number of things have happened in Arizona. in the past 3 years. No state has benefited more from the American Rescue Plan Act of 21, the Infrastructure Investment Act and Jobs Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. All those things converged to the extent that you have a computer or semiconductor industry in Arizona that arguably is a juggernaut likely to continue indefinitely. And you see that in companies like Microchip, which is way up on increased sales, and its employees have increased 24%. The stock has rallied 148% or so. But it's by no means the exception. It's characteristic of what has happened to Arizona, which is that the semiconductor industry is just taken off as a result of these legislations that have made it so. And, you know, one of the things that you can see there is the average wage or wages for semiconductor employees is now 3% greater than the national average, according to ZipRecruiter. So that's a big change. And Arizona has been transformed.
Okay, this is critical now. We have a debate tomorrow night. I don't know if you're aware of this, Matt. There's a debate tomorrow night between two candidates. One candidate's going to take credit for Arizona. The other candidate's going to take credit for Arizona. Or is Arizona's success separate from national politics?
Well, one candidate can legitimately take credit for Arizona. One candidate will take credit for himself because he's all about himself. He's never been about anything other than himself. And that's the difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
I mean, I think the debate here on Arizona is now what? I mentioned the water issue, and there are constraints not only there, but to California and others as well. With you and Shinpei researching this, where are the constraints in the coming years for Arizona?
Well,
is it just too
Joe
much growth?
Biden's for conservation. Joe Biden's for clean energy. Donald Trump is not. So if you care about water and clean air and clean water, there's no. It's really not a difficult choice.
Okay, but there's a boom in Texas as well. There's something going on here. There's something in the air about the South right now winning big.
Well, the boom in Texas is actually about to become much more complicated, in part because, well, climate change has clearly made Texas very, very uninhabitable in many parts of the year, and that's only going to continue. And unless Texas invests, as it should, in alternative energy, and it's got legislators who have backtracked on that. You know, the taxpayers in Texas are actually paying more on their higher rated debt than California because the legislators have said we're against clean energy, we're against gun control and stuff like that. So that gets really in the way of making things comfortable, and the Texas boom is going to suffer because of that.
I would be remiss if I did not ask you, and I don't mean Bloomberg News, Bloomberg Media, and all that you founded, but just the general state of journalism in America. It just seems to be a clear and present struggle.
Well, yeah, you know, when you look at Arizona, that's a really good question because neither the national media nor the local media are actually covering the economy. Hard to believe, isn't it? That when we wrote last week that Arizona's GDP went up 32% in 3.5 years, wasn't in any digital, print, or broadcast.
Is that? Why?
Because we're covering iridescent vibes, and we talk about polls, which are iridescent vibes.
Preaching to the converted.
Okay? And vibes are perceptions. They're not facts. And so the media is covering perceptions, not facts, which are not particularly helpful.
Fortunately, we're done. Shinpei, medicate him on the way out, please. Matt and I agree on this, folks. I'm just busting his chops. Mathieu Winkler, the founder of Bloomberg News. I really can't say enough about this Arizona piece. I'll get it out on Twitter and LinkedIn for your consideration. Of course, up first, Matt Winkler's Bloomberg terminal. We got and the future's negative 11 right now. The VIX 13.12. What am I watching? We are in touch, frankly, out of the Tokyo bureau that Matt Winkler invented. We're looking at Japanese intervention. We do not see that yet, but we're monitoring dollar yen and euro yen as well. What a joy. It was a number of years ago, but this was a song where everybody just stopped and listened. John Cougar Mellencamp.
Little ditty about Jack and Diane, two American kids growing up in the heartland. Jackie gonna be a football star, Diane's debutante backseat of Jackie's car.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in that fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mathieu on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mathieu. Mr. Sweeney on his way to a huge Bloomberg Invest event downtown. He will be with Alex Steele in 59 minutes with terrific conversation. Cliff Asness yesterday, among others, down at Shanali Bassett's Bloomberg Invest, by all accounts, a huge success. Great conversations. Gary Gensler was there yesterday of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Futures negative. My eyes are failing me here, Lisa. Help me out. Negative 13, Lisa. I'm going blind.
We do. NASDAQ futures down 0.2%. We've got Dow futures down 0.3%. S&P futures down 0.2%. You see the difference here. We've got red on the screen, Tom. This is what we've got.
It's
this
red
morning.
on the screen. It's crisis.
Yeah, it's crisis. Okay, and it was quite a difference yesterday. Fueled by NVIDIA, started to running out of that steam. So now you're starting to see that difference. What's causing the difference? You had some more Fed speak. That's causing a big shift. You had Fed Governor Michelle Bowman repeated that her view of borrowing costs should remain higher for some time. So that's affecting the markets right now. We head over to the bond market. You see a difference there. You see the 2-year yield, 4.72%, down 1 basis point. Now you have the 10-year yield, 4.28%. That is up 3 basis points. So we talked about NVIDIA, so let's check in with those shares. And it's starting to shift a little bit now. NVIDIA shares now down about 0.1%. So we're seeing that shift this morning. Yesterday, it added a 7% gain. After the bell, we're going to hear from NVIDIA rival Micron Technology. They're up about 2% right now. But what's really moving the markets, we've talked about it. EV maker Rivian, those shares up 36%. Volkswagen announced investing $5 billion in the company. It's forming this joint venture to develop new cars, new software. And then you have shares of FedEx. They're up about 14%. Profits beat estimates. Yeah, the firm hinted at that divestiture of its freight business too on top of it. Also stock buyback. So a lot going on there. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Over to you, Tom.
So what we're going to do now is get opportunistic. We had Dominic Konstam with us, Mizuho, and now of the similar caliber, Alberto Gallo joins us in our New York studios with Andromeda Capital Management, truly expert on bonds and debt opportunities as well. I believe, Alberto, the calendar is 26. How do you say June in French? Juin, I think? I can't remember. It's the 26th of June. There's an election in 4 days, and then a second election July 7th. Is it too late to get the recovery in France right now, or can you buy French debt this morning?
Good morning. There's a lot of fear, and we got to understand if it's for the right reasons. The real tail event in France is a left-wing majority, and that's very, very unlikely. It's very unlikely. So with a hung parliament or a center-right government, the focus is going to be on immigration. It's similar to a potential U.S. agenda, in the coming years. So it's not a big fiscal change. We do like the fear here. We think there's an opportunity. We had the biggest swing from longs to shorts in the European Investment Grade Index on record in the last few weeks. So we like not just the French sovereign, but the banks, the corporates. There's a lot of fear around a big crisis, and banks are much stronger, corporates are much stronger. So you have a lot of things that have been priced for an emergency, and it's just not there.
We'll talk about the banks, because I think particularly for our American audience, they're very familiar with the frenzy of earnings over 4 or 5 humongous banks, and everything else as well. And there's almost here an ignorance about European banks. When you say the banks, are you talking about buy common stock in major banks, or are you talking something more sophisticated?
I mean, both stocks and bonds from banks have come down. This is an environment of higher for longer, both in the US and in Europe, and banks are doing really well from an earnings perspective, and also a few other sectors, but banks are doing particularly well. And also they used to have a lot of bonds in their book, a lot of government bonds, and now that's been reduced. So even if sovereign spreads go wider, if French bonds or Italian bonds go wider, the transmission mechanism to a banking contagion is much lower. So I think that when we see investors starting to hedge for extreme scenarios like Euro exit or things that are completely out of the picture, of the realistic picture, then we like that fear because it creates some opportunity. And so tactically, there's an entry point. We like this as a buy opportunity on European credit.
When you say European, is it core European, as Martin Feldstein talked about? Is it the opportunistic Eastern Europe, maybe with more political polarity? Where is Alberto Gallo's Europe?
So right now, the fear obviously is in France, but also has gone into Italy and to some extent also Germany, because the German economy, that's a big difference from the last cycle, is under threat. The car industry is under pressure, and China is subsidizing EVs very heavily, and German companies are, threading behind the electrification trend. So some of the opportunities are not just in the periphery this time around, but also in core Europe. It used to be that Greece was very wide, and core Europe was very, very safe. Right now, it's a mix. There's opportunities also in France, Germany, and also in the UK.
What do you see in America? I mean, you're over here, no doubt, talking to Andromeda Capital clients and prospective clients as well, but the American prism from Alberto Gallo, what do you see?
We see resilience. There's been a few bumps in consumer spending and some bumps in NFP and claims. So I think here the question is this enough to warrant more Fed cuts? And our view has been very limited cuts, maybe one and done. That's what we see this year. And there's still too many cuts priced in next year. So we see resilience in the economy. I think FOMC members are very aware that inflation is sticky. And so we see higher for longer. But the long end of the curve is inverted. The 10-year is lower than the 2-year Treasury yield. And that keeps long-term capital still flowing into risky assets, into private credit, into private equity. So the question is valuations are a little tight here.
Okay, well, I'm looking at the 10-year yield, and we got almost to 5%. Down we go under 4%. And maybe technically it's a pennant. I don't have much technical love to give me a direction on the 10-year. How do you establish a belief in the U.S. 10-year yield or price?
I think this is about fiscal. And, we are talking about France. We're not talking about elections in November. You've seen the CBO target revision for the deficit this year. I think there's a chance that the deficit will be above 7% next year, and some term premium, so some steepness on the long end of the yield curve will come back. There's another issue which is more immediate, and that's the BOJ. The BOJ holds a lot of treasuries, and with dollar-yen going above 160, there is some pressure at some point to sell some of the treasury holdings. This is because the U.S. economy is doing so much better than Japan and other economies. So you have a lack of new buyers on the long end of the curve. The Treasury is obviously issuing very front end. Why is this important? Because obviously it affects all the prices of all the risk assets. It's the long end, that's the key. And we think the long end can go back higher from
Out
here.
of your remit, take this over to the technology boom in America. There is, folks, I'm not going to go into it now because of time with Alberto Gallo, but you can link in your belief in interest rates far out to how Meta does or how NVIDIA does. Are you a tech bull based off bond market analysis?
I think here the question is, the fundamental question is, will central banks accept inflation above 2% de facto? Maybe not revising their targets officially. And if they do, then you don't want to own cash, you don't want to own paper assets, you want to own tech monopolies, you want to own gold, you want to own credit, you want to own real estate. That's, I think, the underlying factor, the underlying fear that's moving investors to into areas of safety. It's not exuberance, it's capital preservation.
You're looking at the free cash flow of tech. You just sounded like that was a Brussels moment with Alberto Gallo. See how he got in there, rich tech monopolies? No one but Gallo would do that. It's like the edge of Brussels. Here's what I see here. Are you suggesting that Apple is a conservative stock, a value stock, a foundation place to tuck money?
Essentially, Apple or Microsoft, right? They are monopolies, and they are cash parks, or today, if you're worried about inflation, these are things where you can store your capital, and that's why it's a good stock market, but it's not doesn't reflect growth. Russell is still behind.
Alberto, we don't care. What does Venice do about tourism? You lived in Venice as a kid. You're on a boat in Venice as a kid. What in God's name does Venice do about tourism? Fix it.
Too many tourists, right? Too many people want to move to Italy, and but it's a good thing. The periphery countries in Europe, Southern Europe, has outperformed Germany, and it's gone back to Greece or Italy. They've gone back to pre-COVID growth levels faster than core Europe. So it's a pretty interesting turn of events.
Wonderful to see you in New York.
Thank you.
In New York, Alberto Gallo. Thank you so much with Andromeda capital management. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Tom, thank you very much. Results are in from some key primary contests across the country. Let's begin in New York with this report from Bloomberg's John Tucker.
In New York's closely watched 16th congressional Democratic primary, pro-Israel moderate George Latimer comes out on top, defeating incumbent Jamal Bowman, a member of the Progressive Squad in Congress. It became the most expensive House primary in U.S. history. Latimer's victory speech was an appeal for unity.
We turn a page and we say that we believe in inclusion of everybody in our representation.
Bowman's defeat signals a significant blow to liberals who've been trying to push the party farther left. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
Bowman lost 58% to 42%. Besides New York, 3 other states held congressional primaries, and Republican candidates backed by Donald Trump came up short in 2 of them. In South Carolina's 3rd District, Sherry Biggs defeated Mark Burns in a runoff election, 51% to 49%. Biggs is a political newcomer who was backed by South Carolina's governor. Burns is a black pastor who supported Trump for nearly a decade, though the former president did not campaign for him. In Utah, the race for Mitt Romney's open Senate seat goes to Congressman John Curtis. He won with 50.7%, defeating a Trump-endorsed mayor, Trent Staggs, and 2 other Trump-supporting candidates. In Colorado, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert won her bid for re-election after switching districts to run for retiring Ken Buck's open house seat. Boebert defeated several lesser-known candidates with 43% of the vote. Supreme Court is getting ready for 3 straight days of decisions that will likely wrap up this session. Some of the other cases yet to be decided include President Trump's claim of absolute immunity from prosecution for official acts. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom?
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Important headlines for Global Wall Street. Out of Tokyo, this is Masato Kanda, of course, often at the IMF in Washington, and it was at Marrakesh as well. Mr. Kanda commenting, and he is moving yen to a stronger yen. Again, in Tokyo, this is live. We're watching Forex with high level of urgency. Mr. Kanda says we'll take appropriate steps on FX as needed. And of course, the yen pairing the losses here. Mr. Kanda refrains from commenting on the current moves and whether they are excessive. These are delicate things. There's translation issues as well. We'll go to the screen. That's what Matt Winkler would want us to do. Dollar yen 160.32. Euro yen, I'm going to call it stable at a 171.13. It was weaker yen an hour ago. So we have Kanda speaking literally now. We'll have to see how those headlines roll over the next hour. From New York City, worldwide, across the nation, on YouTube, on Apple CarPlay, on Android Auto. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mathieu. We've got a little movement in futures, but we're at red on the screen. NASDAQ futures down 0.2%, 50 points. Dow futures, same down 0.2%, down 86 points. We have S&P futures down about 14 points. We head over to the bond market. The 2-year yield, 4.72%, down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, up 4 basis points. Currencies, the Japanese yen breached 160 per dollar right now. Japanese yen 160.28 against the dollar. More economic data out today, starting with new home sales for May. That's out at 10 a.m. Wall Street time. All attention, though, focused on Friday with PC inflation, spending, and income. Shares of British food delivery company. It's called Deliveroo. They're higher, up 3% in London. And that's because Jeffrey said that Reuters report of DoorDash's interest in a takeover could only be the start of things to come. DoorDash up about 1%. And news from Paramount Global. The company says it's talking with potential international streaming partners. Those shares down about 0.5%. And Disney facing some legal troubles. The company could face a class action lawsuit. It alleges its agreements with YouTube and DirecTV, well, they've led to some price increases for consumers. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, over to you.
Lisa, thanks so much. Joe Mathieu to join us on the debate tomorrow. We'll do that in a bit. Coming up in 20 minutes, all I can say is I'm very excited about what Brad Stone and Angelina Raskowy have done. It is a new Bloomberg Business Week. It is exquisite. We'll talk about this in about 15 minutes. Right now, exquisite, and this is a really important moment for all of you. Jay Hatfield joins us. He's with Infrastructure Capital Management, and it's a really intelligent path to how you go to SPX 6000. Jay, you really believe in the stock market. Why?
Well, we have a couple of non-consensus views. The first, the most important, is that the economy is slowing. And keep in mind, for 4 years, we said it wasn't slowing when a lot of people said they were. And the reason, and we'll see at 10 o'clock, as Lisa mentioned, new home sales they're not crashing, but they're slowing. We have 9 months of inventory, which is heading towards the great financial crisis. We had 12 months. Existing home sales are slow. A lot of consumer spending is driven by housing, and you're seeing an uptick in unemployment and also claims. So we think the U.S. economy is slowing, and the Fed will have to cut by September.
To put this in perspective, folks, I really take issue with the Standard & Poor's 500, which I don't think America's hardwired on. I get that it's a superior index, but the Dow, at 39,000, you're modeling out a 43,000 Dow. That's the SPX equivalent. Does the public, or frankly, does American Wall Street understand, or do they visualize Dow 43,000? I don't think they do.
No, I think that most Americans tend to be too negative about the market, and they tend to be closet Keynesians, so they don't focus enough on the money supply. And the money supply is critical, and not just interest rates, but the money supply when global central banks are injecting liquidity.
Like a pandemic.
Correct, yes. That was an obvious sign. We told our clients that was super bullish, which was correct. You have to watch these global flows. We calculate the global monetary base. We're the only ones who do that. It's not difficult to do, but we do that. And the ECB is cutting their 30% of the global monetary base, or Europe is. That's super bullish, and the U.S. is going to have to follow. Partly for the reasons you were talking about earlier, is the U.S. dollar is going to get very strong, and it's going to slow the U.S. economy.
This is Kudlow 101, back when Larry was with Bear Stearns, as well. MO, I mean, MO is like a zero number, M1, M2, M3, right. MO as well. So the vector that you see here is a shrinking monetary base.
Well, that's what's been happening, but now, because when you raise rates, you have to shrink the monetary base to get rates to go higher. There's no dial in the New York Fed to change rates. So that's super negative for stocks. We saw that in 22. Last year, the monetary base was up a little bit in the U.S. That is M0. But this year, to get rates to go down substantially, particularly overseas, you're going to have to get a big liquidity injection. That flows into the global capital markets.
Is that what we're seeing in foreign exchange now as a precursor to a dollar stronger? I'm not, don't give me the hysteria, the Plaza Accord or the Louvre Accord. But the answer is very few people out there are looking for any demonstrable dollar strength. Is that where we're heading?
Well, certainly it's strengthening against a lot of currencies already, particularly the Canadian dollar, because we have differential.
Well, that's because
policies.
Edmonton lost, but that's a different story. Right. Continue.
But the only counter to that is that if we're correct that the labor market's weakening in the U.S., because the Fed focuses on the labor market, they are hyper-Keynesians. Right. And there's an anticipation of that September cut that could mediate the appreciation. But I would point out that net exports are a huge drag. It's actually what's holding up Europe. And that our GDP was only up 1.3% last quarter. Everybody kind of ignored that, but that does matter. That reduces demand for employment in the U.S. So we see both the labor market, the housing market, and foreign currency being a drag on U.S. GDP, and eventually the Fed will figure that out.
That's strong language to say the Fed is hyper-Keynesian. When you say that, is it a Powell prescription? Is it the governors that are hyper-Keynesian? You're not going to tell me the Dallas Fed or the Richmond Fed are hyper-Keynesian.
Just the majority. I mean, the St. Louis Fed used to be the bastion of monetarism.
Thomas Melzer building it out and all.
But after Bullard left, they've kind of faded from that, and there's really no one carrying the water on the monetary side. And we just think it should be balanced. And you can't ignore monetary policy when the Fed increases the monetary base by 60%. Powell says he ignores it, but you just can't do that.
Okay, but Powell's going to say, hey, I'm not making fiscal policy here. We're having MMT in real time is frankly what we're doing, right?
Mm-hmm. No doubt that for the first time since the Great Depression, the U.S. government is doing effective counter-cyclical government spending, which is focused on investment, not consumption. So it's sort of by accident. It was really Mansionomics, but that's the ideal way to stabilize the economy.
So then everybody listening to this, YouTube's lighting up like a candle. Everybody that's listening to this is saying, then how can this guy, Jay Hatfield, get to SPX 6,000, Dow 43,000? How do you take this fiscal stress and bring it over to equity optimism?
Well, if we're right about the Fed cutting, they're going to have to inject liquidity into the system, as is China. They're about to cut policy. So when you get $2 trillion, that's our forecast, of additional liquidity in the stock and bond markets,
they got to go up.
They have to go up. So we're much more bullish than your prior guest about U.S. 10-year. You know, the U.S. 10-year is the highest in the world in the OECD. And so we think it'll rally below 4, and that'll get a broader rally and get us to 6,000. It's going to be difficult to get to 6,000 on Apple and NVIDIA alone.
I mean, and this is really something, folks. I mean, I can't say enough. This is what surveillance is about, is this collegial, informed debate. So you and Ian Lingan at BMO Capital Markets are waltzing below 4%. What's the when of this? Don't give me Jackson Hole. It's not that important. But what's the when to get a catalyst?
Well, we need to continue to get global rate cuts, because that's what
or China to act.
China, we do need the September cut. We think if we don't cut this, the Fed doesn't cut this year, we will have a mild recession next year. So we absolutely need that. We won't get to 6,000 if the Fed doesn't cut this year.
Jay Hatfield, thank you so much. Greatly. Look at this, Jay. They're making headlines for you. We have on the Bloomberg, folks, for those that don't have a terminal in their car, we have what we call a red sticky, which is an important headline. Now, this is not Jay Hatfield. This is Mathieu Kanda speaking in Tokyo. But there's a headline. The Bloomberg Dollar Index, this is the BBDXY, rises to the highest level since November on a percentage basis, blended basis. Jay Hatfield, are you looking for 2%, 5% dollar strength, or can you go further than that?
Well, it is dependent on whether we get this weak data, particularly the labor report. Assuming the data is not as weak as we think it is, then yes, we could get, we could even get euro parity, which would be an enormous rally, probably not, but possible, get somewhere close to that. Because you can't have these wide differentials in global monetary policy and not have big blowouts.
I don't know. I'm running out of time. How come I'm running out of time with Jay Hatfield? I thought I controlled the clock. Jay, we got to go. Thank you so much. This was really, really good. In Tokyo, our bureau reports, Mr. Kanda says recent FX moves are rapid. Matsuo Kanda says recent FX moves are one-sided. Maybe that's what Mr. Hatfield was speaking about. Stay with us, Global Wall Street from New York City. Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mathieu alongside Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney on assignment. We have your opening bell report. So how the market's going to react? We had more Fed speak. We had Fed Governor Michelle Bowman said borrowing costs should remain higher for some time. We also have more economic data out in about a half hour from now. We have new home sales coming out. So let's see how things shape up for midweek trading. We'll start with the S&P 500. Right now down about 0.2%, 11 points at 5,457. The Dow down 0.2%, 99 points at 39,014. And we have the NASDAQ, yes, down about 0.1%, 15 points at 17,699. We get to the two-year yield, 4.73%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.30%, and that's up 5 basis points. To commodities right now, we want to check with spot gold. That's lower, $2,297 an ounce. Brent crude, $84 a barrel. WTI crude, $80 a barrel. Then we have the Japanese yen, 160.58 against the dollar. At the bell, want to check in with shares of NVIDIA. Well, they're up about 0.5%. That is your opening bell report. Over to you, Tom.
Lisa Mathieu, thanks so much. In the Keene household, long ago and far away, people go, well, how did you get like this? We had lots of business magazines around, Fortune, all the rest. And one of them was Business Week. Business Week was a weekly must-read, must-skim, dive into it. In the new journalism, John Micklethwaite and our team have decided that Bloomberg Business Week should be monthly. And I was like, well, it can't be. It's called Business Week. It can't be Business Monthly. But it's Bloomberg Business Week. And they have hit the ball out of the park in Boston language, over the turnpike, over the Cascade Flagon, with the July edition with Mr. Arnault of LVMH on a cover. And it is a spectacular success with the leadership of Brad Stone. You know him from Amazon, and particularly with the leadership of Angelina Rascouet holding court in Paris over this juggernaut, which is French luxury and French fashion. Angelina, congratulations on a tour de force of Avenue Montaigne in what France is doing in luxury. What is the distinctive thing you learned from Mr. Arnault?
Hi, Tom. I mean, what we learned from Mr. Arnault is something I guess we could have guessed. At the age of 75, he's not letting go. You know, many entrepreneurs that we see in Silicon Valley, you know, they've created juggernauts. You think about Jeff Bezos, you think about Bill Gates, right, but they've stepped down from the daily management.
Right.
Bernard Arnault, that's not the case.
Okay, we're going to try to get a rehook up here with Angelina Rascouet to get better audio for all of you worldwide as well. What's fascinating about this, and this goes to the American television effort Succession, is how will the Arnault family exceed into the future? Angelina, again, to my question, what was the distinctive feature you and Brad Stone learned about Mr. Arnault?
Hi, Tom. What we learned about Mr. Arnault is something I guess we could have guessed, but basically at the age of 75, he's not letting go. When you think about other Silicon Valley moguls who've created, you know, Amazon, you think about Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates at Microsoft, they've stepped down from day-to-day management of these juggernauts. Bernard Arnault, right, he's not ready to let go.
Can he go back? He had a Richemont News yesterday, I believe, I can't remember the FT, whoever reported it, but Angelina Rascouet, is Mr. Arnault still so active that he could go after Cartier, or dare I say, renew his over a decade ago effort to go after Hermes?
So that was indeed a part of our reporting, and yes, that was our exclusive. And what we found out during the reporting is that Bernard Arnault has accumulated a personal stake inside Richemont, so the owner of Cartier, of Van Cleef and Arpels. That's what we call the hard luxury. He's been dropping praises for the past few months for those brands, for Johann Rupert, who's the controlling shareholder of that group, right, and basically it's a personal stake. But the question is, what will be his ultimate intentions?
What's fascinating here, Angelina, you've provided, I think, within the industry, huge leadership on this. Why are we talking about this? Why are Americans taking United 57 out of Newark for the sole purpose of going to Avenue Montaigne and spending a ton of money. Why are we so addicted to your world of French luxury?
I guess there was COVID, and if you look at the short term, there was COVID. People were stuck at home, and once the restrictions sort of loosened, people were craving those objects because they wanted to go out, they wanted to look good again. But if you look at a macro picture, what we've seen in the past, 30 years is that there's been an explosion of multimillionaires, of multi-billionaires, and all of these creates a lot of, purchasing power for all these goods. But even the aspirational class, right. it's all about aspiration, and they desire those goods at the end of the day.
Do you, and I mean, you got your Bloomberg Business Week magazine, and you've got ads from Bulgaria, ads from Patek Philippe. Everybody had to show up for this issue with Mr. Arnault. Do you, or does Mr. Arnault partition luxury into different groups where there's a fancy luxury prospering and maybe another one doing less so?
I mean, that's the whole, I guess, the whole strength of LVMH is that you have different brands that cater, you have some bold brands with big logos that cater maybe more to an aspirational class, and then you have the quiet luxury, but you also have the experiential luxury. Right. Think about fancy hotels and, restaurants even.
Okay, well, help me, Angelina, with where this fits in with the France of right now. There's a small news cycle coming out of France. It involves an election which has turned your Paris upside down. It involves an Olympics where I wonder if we're even going to execute it as well. What is it like on the streets of Paris on June 26th?
I mean, indeed, we have the Olympic Games coming out. The opening ceremony is going to be on July 26th. LVMH is a big sponsor of those Olympics, and indeed, it's tricky. It's a delicate situation if you think about it, because up until the 9th of June, we didn't know that Macron was going to dissolve the assembly, and every now and then you have a street protest because, as you know, we could get a new, completely new political landscape in France come July 7th.
What is fashion doing right now? I mean, I get it. There's like 15 Arnault children. I'm making a joke, folks. And they're like trying to readjust Tiffany and all that. But over the summer into the fall season, what's the Arnault goal to move forward? What's the strategy to move forward?
When we spoke to Bernard Arnault, he told us, maybe 2024 will not be as good as a year as 2023. But what I'm looking at is 2030. So he's got really the long-term view. And at the end of the day, he doesn't want to please investors on a quarter by quarter basis. So he's thinking about his troops, whether that's, executives that are not part of the family, but also training his children to maybe at some point take over when he's no longer around.
Where do they make all this stuff? I saw the other day that Hermès is continuing to build out, I believe in Bordeaux, they're manufacturing around the nation of France. Where does all this stuff get made, Angelina Rascoway?
A lot of these products, I mean, most of these luxury products, whether that's jewelry, whether that's watches, they're made in France. When you think about, 2 years ago, I went to the opening of an atelier, of Louis Vuitton in Vendôme. But, what we saw as well is that in 2019, Bernard Arnault went to Texas because they opened a leather goods plant for Louis Vuitton, and he was there with Donald Trump, the then president.
Lisa Mathieu emails in and says, can Angelina get us a Birkin bag? Are you kidding me, Angelina? I mean, just explain to our American audience the madness of the scarcity issue that Bernard Arnault or the Dumas family do. It's all about scarcity, isn't it?
That really helps the brand. You don't want to overexpose your products. You want to create desire. Desirability is a name that comes back in every single CEO's mouth when they talk about their products, and that's really the name of the game. You want to create a sense of scarcity, and because that's going to create a wait list for your products.
Angelina, do you have a Birkin bag?
I don't.
Angelina Rascoway, thank you so much, folks. I was like skeptical. I'm like, yeah, monthly issue, great. Home run, fabulous effort here by the team at Bloomberg Business Week with Mr. Arnault. here, and it's just got Tom Orlick's in it, our wonderful economist, expert on China, and many, many others as well. That's a launch, and of course, I'll tell you about the subscription at another time. Lisa, did you see that with the Birkin, or like the Kelly bag? You can't even get that.
No, it's about creating this hype behind it, so it's this fear of like missing out, like you
Yeah.
need to have it, and everybody, some people have, and if you have it, it's like this status symbol.
It's like, how many times have you seen The Devil Wears Prada?
A lot. I
a
love
lot to
that
15
movie.
times.
Love
I love
that
when she walks in and throws the bag on the desk. And they do it like every day. It's a different, bag. Angelina Rascoway in Paris with our news in New York City. Michael Bell.
On the other end of the fashion plate, the Supreme Court is expected to issue several major decisions this week. Starting today, Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
The court has already said it is prepared to extend its session into July. That's an unusual move, but there are more rulings to announce. Among them, a ruling on former President Trump's claim that he is immune from prosecution for alleged crimes committed while in office. Other decisions include cases on the obstruction charges against the January 6th Capitol rioters and abortion access in medical emergencies. The court has decisions coming down today, tomorrow, Friday, and possibly next week. We do expect to hear today's rulings starting at 10 this morning. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, now a free man, has landed in his home country of Australia. A U.S. federal judge on Saipan accepted Assange's guilty plea to one count of violating the Espionage Act, accused of publishing military secrets, and sentenced him to time served as per Assange's agreement with the Department of Justice. Lawyer Jennifer Robinson has been representing Assange in Australia and the UK.
Finally, after 14 years of legal battles, Julian Assange can go home a free man. This also brings to an end a case which has been recognised as the greatest threat to the First Amendment in the 21st century.
Assange spent 5 years in a UK prison fighting extradition to the U.S., and before that, he spent 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy. In prison, Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich appeared in a Russian court today at the start of an espionage trial. Gershkovich, who is 32, and the newspaper have denied Russian Federal Security Service accusations that he was spying for the CIA when he was detained in the Ural city of Yekaterinburg during a reporting trip in March of last year. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Lisa.
We got a Bloomberg fashion correspondent, Lisa Mathieu. Here's how bad it is, Lisa. And thank you, Chip, out on YouTube, on our live chat for the line out the LV store on the Champs-Élysées. Louis Vuitton Maison, Champs-Élysées. Okay, 7500 Hewitt, Paris. Book an appointment. Lisa, would you like me to book an appointment for you? The next appointment available is Monday, July 22nd.
That's the next
3
one?
p.m.
Oh, my goodness.
That's the world that Angelina Rascoway's in. You got to wait 3 weeks to get in the door.
God. Between that and the Apple store, I don't know what
Hey, there's no line at Walmart where I am.
Is there a line at Costco? I mean, do you have to book an appointment to get into Costco, Lisa?
Not at all. They're ready to take my money.
I'm right there in the front row at Costco.
I will say this, folks, and I hugely advantage in what Bloomberg has done for me. I was in Paris, and I can't say enough about the Dior Museum. It's better than the Louvre. It is by appointment, but you can get it. You're over there on a Friday. On Sunday, you go to 30 Montagne, and you go in there, and it is spectacular. At the end of the tour, they have the prisoner of war card of Dior's sister. It's got everything in it. He saved everything. It is spectacular. The Dior Museum in Paris. Go there. Don't go to the Louvre. You'll do better. Thank you to Angelina Rascoway and Brad Stone on luxury in Paris. It's Bloomberg Surveillance.
24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mathieu. We've got red on the screen in midweek trading right now. NASDAQ, that is down. Actually, it just turned up a point right now, up a point at 17,721. The Dow, that's down about 0.3%, down 150 points at 38,961. We have the S&P 500 down 0.1%, 9 points at 5,459. We have the 2-year yield 4.73%, down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%. That's up 5 basis points. Some big moves in currencies. Bloomberg Dollar Index rises to the highest level since November. Then Japanese yen weakening to the lowest level against the dollar since December 1986. The Japanese yen 160.54 against the dollar. Shares of FedEx higher, up 12%. The company delivered a profit forecast, beat expectations, also announced a stock buyback. On the flip side, you have General Mills down 4%. That's parent of brands including Cheerios. It had a disappointing sales outlook. Shoppers are just starting to buy less at the grocery store. And shares of EV maker Rivian up 32%. Volkswagen agreed to invest $5 billion in a joint venture. And since we're speaking of EVs, this study led by Harvard Business School, it finds that 1 in 5 public EV chargers in the U.S., well, they just don't work. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, over to you.
Lisa Mathieu, thanks so much. I want to make this clear, folks. We're looking at foreign exchange intervention in Japan. It has not occurred yet. And the basic idea I have is I came in this morning and I look at euro yen, I look at dollar yen, and I look at yen as compared to the Chinese yuan. Now with the movements and now with what we've seen from Matsuo Kanda, I'm really only focused on dollar yen. For those of you that are following this, 160.50, we did get out to 160.60. I would say the set of tensions I see on the Bloomberg screen are really extraordinary. We're watching Japan this morning. Watching Atlanta is Joe Mathieu with Kayleigh Lyons, the host of Balance of Power. Mr. Mathieu, fully focused on CNN's presidential debate. Joe, it's being simulcast by everyone. Let's just begin with Mathieu 101. Yep. Why is this debate so important?
Well, look, I think because it's the first, in this case, it's the first for these two in 4 years. And there was clearly an effort here or a thought by the Biden campaign that we do this early to call Donald Trump's bluff on whether he even wanted to debate. And by the way, who knows if everyone shows up still? I'll believe it when I see it. But also to get to the age issue, Tom, they want to knock this thing down before we get into the throes of conventions.
I look, Joe, at where we are. We spent a lot of time talking about Camp David and Biden rehearsal. Is there Trump rehearsal?
There's not, and that's become a big part of the storyline. I'm not sure it matters. We're talking about Donald Trump. You can tell me what you think about this, because right now Joe Biden's getting up. He's probably working with the trainer. He's in a room with 2 podiums, and his most trusted advisors, they're doing mock debates, what they call murder boards. And that's part of the process of being ready for something like this, where Donald Trump is kind of riffing with his advisors. He's showing up at fundraisers this week. And that's the way that he's been able to succeed. I don't know if one's better than the other. If you talk to Rick Davis, our Republican strategist who's prepared a lot of candidates for these debates, he says you have to go through the process, even being in a room that duplicates the room you'll be in Atlanta on Thursday night.
With the unique rules, and we did a lot yesterday, Joe, on the rules with David Gura, who will be in Atlanta.
Yeah.
But with the unique rules, my amateur take is they will allude to like a theme like inflation. And both of these candidates, or at least one, will have written answers. Am I wrong?
Yes, right. That's what it feels like. Now, that doesn't mean Donald Trump won't be able to yell in the background on Joe Biden's mic or vice versa. But, Tom, I'm allowing for a possibility that no one's talking about here. What happens after we fan the flames and raise the bar on this thing and make it the most important event of the campaign? What happens if they both show up and they're boring?
Well,
I'm not sure I have an answer
it's bad radio. I'll start with that.
That's true.
Right now. I mean, what an odd campaign, Joe Mathieu. You've done so much of this, particularly through the, knockdown prism of Massachusetts politics. What an odd debate. Is it? Do you just presume it's one debate? It's one and done for these two candidates?
Well, ABC News would beg to differ because they think there's a deal on another one in September. And I suspect these candidates are going to want to debate again as we get closer, once we get through primaries, we get in the fall, people pay attention again. Look, there are questions about whether anybody's going to watch this on Bloomberg or CNN or anywhere else in real time, and specifically the young people Joe Biden wants to talk to on Thursday night. What happens when the entire debate is digested or consumed in clips on Twitter and your doom scroll on Friday morning? That means everyone needs to seek a viral moment. So it probably won't be boring, but it could get to be silly, and that's a risk for both.
The balance of power is about so much more than just the presidential ballet. I thought the Tuesday primary votes were really illuminating. Do they suggest to you that this is finally a signal for the President of the United States to do what Reagan did years ago and move to the middle?
It's a really great question. Jamal Bowman might say yes. He had $15 million in AIPAC money pitted against him, but I don't know. You have to look at these races individually. We all are charged with trying to find a trend. We love a trend story. But if you look at this case specifically in New York, you know, Jerry Nadler, the Democrat from Manhattan, said it wasn't necessary for AIPAC to spend all this. He was simply out of step with his district. And there's something to be said there. You have to know who brought you. He was talking about the South Bronx in a rally on Saturday night.
Okay.
Tom, we both know that's not even in his district.
What about the districts, the suburbs of Philadelphia or out to Pittsburgh with the struggles of Western Pennsylvania? I mean, there's a swing state. You're following this with Kaylee Lines each and every day. How does Pennsylvania view this debate?
Great questions. I'm not sure either candidate knows.
You know,
Joe Biden thinks that's home.
Have I ever been on balance of power? I'm asking great questions.
You're doing the surveillance nap, by the way.
I'm doing it exactly. Joe, how did you know that? Anyway,
well,
Joe,
I've
seriously.
tried to get you on the show. Let's be honest.
3, 2, 1. Joe Mathieu, how does Pennsylvania view this debate?
I don't know if Pennsylvania cares. What are they going to talk about that's going to move the needle on Thursday night? They're trying to speak to 8% in the mushy middle, Tom, and they don't like to be called that. They don't like to be called low information voters, but it's really early. People are at a cookout this weekend getting ready for the 4th of July, and I'm not sure that we should assume that everybody in Pennsylvania is plugged into this. Inflation, sure. Joe, do you have a plan? Donald Trump, are you going to make it worse if you extend the tax cuts? I think that might be the extent to which a lot of folks in Pennsylvania are watching on Thursday
Do you
night.
predict that tax cuts or tax keeps will be a big theme?
I do, because that's a big one for Donald Trump, Tom. Kevin Brady's going to come in and talk to us in studio a little bit later on Balance of Power, the former Republican chair of the Ways and Means Committee. His full-time job right now is getting this done. The lobbying effort has begun. A fortune will be spent to make these tax cuts permanent next year.
The Kaylee Lines Show with Joe Mathieu. Look for Balance of Power with David Gura in Atlanta. Really important debate tomorrow night. I think it's 8 p.m. tomorrow night for us. We're starting early for this ridiculous 9 p.m. time zone as well. In the time we've got left with the heat breaking, we go to surveillance congestion correspondent John Tucker here. I mean, off the elections, how does Governor Hochul handle this? I mean, we're talking about thousands of jobs may be lost in New York because of her decision not to fund the congestion, which funds all these projects. It's an immediate debate.
It's going to have to become something like a business tax, probably to make up for that shortfall. But she's smart. She knows where the votes are and who's voting which way. In the outer suburbs, you know, as we saw,
it mentions
in the 16th district, which includes Westchester and
so what happened there?
Parts of the Bronx. Well, you had the moderate coming in, the Westchester chief executive becoming the next congressman because, you know, in the November election, it's going to be the Democrat who wins, who defeats a member of the Squad, one of the more liberal, progressive Democrats in Congress. So you have the suburbs saying, we want moderates.
Is there any sense in your reading of this, John Tucker, that they can amend to a lower than $15 amount on the congestion tax? I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it.
I think it's dead and buried.
It's dead and buried.
Okay. I mean, that's just my take on it. That's
John
my
Tucker,
opinion.
thank you so much. Well, you've been following this. I mean, it's a huge issue for those of you across the nation, and it is a test tube, if you will, for the rest of the nation and how we're going to fund infrastructure as well. What a great show. Thanks to the team for blowing up the show like 3-4 times. To have Dominic Konstam and Alberto Gallo and others. Thank you, Angelina Rasco, and short notice out of Paris as well. I mean, how do you end? The heat wave breaks. You know, it's not 95 anymore. Def Leppard.